across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome back. It is the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia. She's back tomorrow morning, of course, at 10 o'clock. As you will be more than aware, over the weekend, Donald Trump stunned allies and critics alike by ordering an operation that led to the capture of the Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro, triggering a bit of an international backlash, although some support as well. Is Trump right, or is he a global danger? It's a perfectly reasonable question. Which side do you fall on when it comes to this curious incursion into South America? Details to come. Also this afternoon, Sir Keir Starmer has moved to shut down speculation about his future, insisting he expects to be in office still by this time next year. Yeah, I wouldn't say that with any level of confidence, Keir. I mean, his party might be, but will he still be leader? I'm thinking May elections, which, by the way, are 17 weeks away. And also the Prime Minister is pushing for closer ties with the EU, proposing a youth mobility scheme and easier work agreements, sparking, naturally, accusations of Brexit betrayal and party unease. Your stance on that as well, please. Everything you need to know. We'll bring you all the breaking news right here at the home of common sense. This is Talk 0344 499 1000. If you want to drop us a voice note, it's the same number. Oscar Reddrop with us in a couple of moments as well. Is Trump right, or is he a global I mean, what a weekend. And one that genuinely, we've got some great voices coming on this, needs a bit of explaining. I am genuinely at a bit of a loss. Have I got this right? OK, correct me if I've got this wrong. The President of the United States, almost out of nowhere, took over another country. Bang, there it is. There's the headline. I had to read it twice. Surely that breaking news alert that popped up on my phone was wrong. Now look, I get the need to defend yourself. I understand when a mad dictator needs to be called into check. If some horrific Marxist is sitting just 1,300 miles from your coastline, you might want to have a word. On a troubling day, you might want to send the boys in. Maybe even arrest the blighter, stick some of those minion glasses on his head and fly him off to the state penitentiary. But take over a country? We're running the country. It's a beautiful thing. I got this wrong, surely. J.D. Vance posted, and I suppose this is the most honest assessment. He says, this is the US Vice President, he defended the mission. He says, I understand the anxiety over the use of military force, but are we just supposed to allow a communist to steal our stuff in our hemisphere and do nothing? Great powers don't act like that, he said. But when it comes to it's not a literal stealing. It's really the curtailing or the stopping of oil and various other American contractors that genuinely did see, a problem in the balance sheet as a result of this horrific leader in Venezuela. Let's make no mistake about it. Maduro is not a nice man. I understand that. He's not a nice bloke. He won't be winning any Nobel Prizes. He wouldn't get a job at your local HR department, put it that way. Several independent bodies have accused Maduro's government of systemic and widespread abuses over the time, arbitrary detention of political opponents, extrajudicial killings by security forces, torture, ill treatment by state security units, enforced disappearances, and brutality against civilians, protesters and critics. Look, this is not a nice bloke. I get that. But there are many regimes around the world that are run by people who are not nice blokes, who've got iffy leaders with horrific track records on justice and basic human rights. On that basis, you could argue Trump should be invading Russia. I don't imagine that's about to happen. So he's a wrong-un, but there's lots of wrong-uns out there. And now we're hearing echoes of noises about Colombia. Oh, we might take over Colombia. It's a beautiful, beautiful country. Maybe even Greenland. I mean, really? What is the man thinking? By the way, this is the bloke that said, we won't get involved in any kind of foreign stuff. It's not our thing. But we might go and take somebody else's country. So the interim leader in Venezuela has been told, well, you can lead. That's very nice of them. But if you put a foot wrong, we're coming to get you. And it's going to be a whole lot worse than your predecessor. What is going on here? Seriously. Somebody explain to me. We'll have some voices on later that might be able to shine some light. I'm just genuinely interested, and I'd like to get to the end of at least this hour with somebody going, actually, this is what needs to happen. Is there a wider geopolitical kind of raison d'etre behind this move at the weekend? I understand shoring up the, your defences and the like, and your clout and your punching power on the global stage. China isn't getting any smaller. And when you think of China, it's not just China, it's all the other places around the world that China have incredible influence over, where economies are almost Chinese dependent. Some you wouldn't. Sri Lanka is a good example. You go to Sri Lanka now, in the right part, it looks like flipping Blackpool. You think, really? Where's the Tamil Tigers? I didn't expect neon lights. Yeah, there's not quite a tower there and a roller coaster, but, the Chinese influence is pervasive. It's all over the show. Is this what Trump is doing? Kind of really ratcheting up American influence in lots, even if it's unconventional? And do you support his right to do it? I think that's the fundamental point. You have to almost park the fact that you might like Trump and support Trump. There's a shed load of very right-wing Republicans who are deeply unhappy about what happened at the weekend. Not the taking of a horrendous Marxist dictator, not that, but we're running the place now. Now that is a game changer. 0344 499 1000, or do you think he made the right call? Explain. Elaborate. Put some meat on the bones for us at this end, if you would. Oscar Redrop is with us to talk through the big stories. Former number 10 advisor. Oscar, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. Let's start then with that story. Donald Trump stunning allies and critics alike by ordering this extraordinary operation that led to the capture of the Venezuelan leader, triggering, I think it's fair to say, a bit of a backlash.
This was one of the most stunning, effective, and powerful displays of American military might and competence in American history.
In American history. He's right about that. In the UK, the fallout is political too. Keir Starmer facing pressure from Labour MPs to condemn the move, even as he stresses that Britain had no involvement.
What I can say is that the UK was not involved in any way in this operation. And as you'd expect, we're focusing on British nationals in Venezuela and working very closely with our embassy. And so I will want to talk to the President, I will want to talk to allies, but at the moment, I think we need to establish the facts. As I say, I can be absolutely clear that we were not involved in that. And as you know, I always say and believe we should all uphold international law. But I think at this stage, fast-moving situation, let's establish the facts and take it from there.
And it doesn't stop there, of course, because Mr. Trump, the president, also reviving those controversial ambitions closer to home, setting his sights on Greenland and facing fresh questions about America's direction under his administration.
We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you. The European Union needs us to have it, and they know that.
I think there's some confusion.
We need Greenland. What do we want? Greenland. When do we want it? Now. Oscar, what is going on here?
Well, lots is going on all at once, which makes it very, very complicated. And double guessing and second guessing someone like Trump is nigh on impossible. I think the simplest thing for your viewers and listeners to understand about Trump is if he wants to do something, he will do it. And sometimes it is as simple and yet confusing as that. I think, Starmer's political problem here back at home, I mean, very cringeworthy to even flirt with the idea that we may have had something to do, to even feel the need to deny that we had any involvement in this. Of course we didn't. This was, in of itself, from a military perspective, there'll be films made about this in decades to come. I mean, it's almost unprecedented. And just from that perspective, hugely, hugely impressive. He was a leader. He is a leader where 8 million or so people, Venezuelans, have fled his country. There is starving people in this country, despite the biggest oil reserves in the world. He can't feed or heat his own people. So this is a pretty, as you put it, a pretty bad, dodgy bloke. That being said, it is remarkable that Trump has charged ahead with this. Even when we think about really, really controversial, wars ultimately, like, Iraq, even then, Bush and Cheney, they went to the efforts to try and get UN approval. So it's a fascinating indicator of where we've gone in the last 20 years, where a power like the UN, a power in inverted commas, is seen as completely irrelevant to someone like Trump. That being said, let's deal with the world as it is, okay? And this might be uncomfortable. And that's why when you're watching people like Darren Jones and Keir Starmer mumble and, maybe this, maybe that, the world is the most dangerous it has ever been in our lifetime since the Second World War. And forces like China and that access, and Russia and Iran, are a real, real, real present threat. And our best shot as a nation is a strong, powerful America. And so for us to be, very mealy-mouthed, fortunately, Trump actually doesn't really give two hoots about whether we approve of something like that's gone on over the last few days. So Starmer shouldn't be, mumbling his way into a mess on it. He should either come out and support President Trump on this, as we sit here now, with, I would say, a huge asterisk of a efficient and right by the Venezuelan people regime change. But on stuff like Greenland, that is when it gets a little bit more complicated, in my view. And I think it's you can like Trump, but you can be hugely uncomfortable. And as a nation, we probably should stand up and say, hang on a minute, the destiny is of that part of the world is nothing to do, unfortunately, with Trump and America.
Is it? Look, I know it's always the easy card to play, the kind of Orwell card. And invariably when people talk about, every time somebody plonks a CCTV camera up, someone says, oh, it's just like 1984. And it is a little bit, but I'm thinking at it from a different perspective here, a sort of a Oceania kind of perspective, as in the world carved up into kind of three specific regions. And we had this message in from John in Sutton, says Trump is ahead of the curve. China spreading their influence into Venezuela and has showed them he's not scared of using hard power to combat Chinese economic and military aggression. If China will now want to buy Venezuelan oil, they'll have to go through the US. And of course, that is arguably the overarching reason why this happened. Venezuela is as oil rich as any nation on planet Earth can get. Is it that? Are we going into this kind of sort of trio of regions around the globe where we just have this bickering and these constant battles between those three, and sometimes, one comes out on top and sometimes they don't? Or is that a bit too tinfoil hat?
That's not too tinfoil hat. Of course, these things are nuanced, and there will be intel and complexities within within that intelligence that mere mortals like us, Ian, will not be privy to and not understand. But if you zoom out a little bit, it kind of is that simple. So where does the UK want to be? Does the UK want to be isolated within a incredibly weak Europe, or does it want to be a big player as part of a strong Europe that does lobbying on behalf of America to make it a stronger Europe? And crucially, do we want to be that little brother, if you like, that is that arm, that powerful arm of America is around the shoulder of here in Europe? I think the answer to that is yes. When we look at these quite clear spheres of power that are growing in the world at the moment, and there is only one place for our national security we need to be. Trump is incredibly, what I would say, when he talks about, we've taken over Venezuela now. Again, I would be cautious about that. That is, Trump does talk in that kind of language sometimes. and then he sees, sense or whatever, however you want to put it, and things cool off and things are done in a more procedural way. That would be the hope. I mean, if America are ultimately invading a country and taking it over and governing it in those terms, without regime change, and we know how difficult regime change is even, then that is a different question. And that's the one bit of, I would give Keir Starmer the benefit of the doubt, that does remain to be seen.
Yeah,
that does remain to be seen.
Indeed. Oscar, stay with us. More to come, more big stories on the way as well. Oscar Redrop with us on the programme. Over to you, 03444991000. Kelvin in Macclesfield says, why would Trump tell Starmer anything about what they're doing? In fairness, he didn't even tell Canada or anyone else what he was doing. Starmer supports Palestine, and look at how he treats criminals, releasing them from jail early, giving them compensation, legal aid, putting them up in hotels, giving them houses, child abusers, rapists. They're welcoming the vile Egyptian and Shamima Begum back into our country. Not the second one. She's not back in. There's no intent. Him and his party support criminals. So if Trump had told the slug anything, he would have rang Maduro and warned him. Crooks and criminals stick together. Starmer is a slug, slimy and spineless. The left wing and slug are criminals. That's my opinion. I stick by it. I've no evidence to prove me wrong. The only thing that would prove you wrong is that Donald Trump actually quite likes Keir Starmer, which is, I know that's unfathomable. But when you speak to anyone in the White House, they say, yeah, he's kind of up there with one of his favourite leaders, probably because he's no contest, right? I think that's maybe the reason. Thank you, Kelvin, for that. 03444991000. Did Trump make the right call? We'll open up the lines of that. You can leave us a voice note there as well. Coming up on 1:20, this is Talk.
Until we start creating deterrence, in other words, arrest, charge, prosecution and a suitable punishment, nothing is going to change. The police can do all their performative policing, which they're such big fans of. Oh, this week we launched a shoplifting initiative in Altrincham and we arrested 17 people, for example. Yeah, that's great, but the shoplifters know that they're here today and gone tomorrow, so they go back to their thieving ways.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 1:20. Oscar Redrop still with us. Let's move to this story, Oscar. This is back to domestic issues. The Prime Minister has moved to shut down speculation about his future, insisting he expects to still be in office this time next year. Keir Starmer has defended his leadership, warned against the instability of frequent changes at the top as Labour faces internal unease and growing scrutiny over its direction in government. Let's have a listen.
We'll be sitting in this seat by 2027, and if this long-form interview works, we can try it again in January of next year as well. I am looking forward to 2026. I'm optimistic about turning the corner, which is good. It's good for the country.
It's good for the country. Keir Starmer's good for the country, Oscar. There you go. I suppose that comes under the category of he would say that, wouldn't he?
Yeah, well, that's all right then, I guess. We can all
yes,
go
it's
home
all
and
fine.
relax.
We imagined the last 18 months.
Yeah, we can all relax now. That's nice and simple, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, I mean, look, I think it is pretty when you're having to constantly remind people that you're going to still be in the job in a year's time. It probably means deep down, you may very well not be.
Yeah.
I don't know about people listening, but when they go to work or to the office or wherever they work, do they go around telling all their fellow employees and mates at work that I'm still in a job. I'm still in a job. I'm going to be here this time next year. It just screams insecurity, and he's right to feel insecure because he has promised change, and there have been resets. He's tried to kickstart the broken engine of an old banger car, it feels like, in number 10, countless times. I mean, you guys should put a compilation together, it all kind of stemming from the Sue Gray days, which feel like, millions and millions of years ago at this point. It's interesting, even just that clip you showed, he looks completely burdened and by the weight of the job. Yeah. And I think the British people, they'll happily disagree with a leader, and they might not like the direction a leader takes the country in.
Sure.
But they have a deep down underlying respect for a leader that makes decisions, that makes calls, that gives you a direction of travel. And actually, and this is my slight hot take on it, is that I think we quite like leaders who look like they're enjoying the job, actually, and that they want it. He doesn't. This is something that I think is underpriced with Keir Starmer. He is not a political person, really. He's a human rights lawyer. He kind of got involved in politics relatively late on. He hasn't been in politics that late, and I honestly, he doesn't want it. You can almost see it in him. He doesn't. He is burdened by the weight of this job, and so when the British people turn around and go, "I don't know what there is to like about you," and you know what? Like I'm being really honest here. Because it's a bit like the England manager. I want the football team manager. I want the prime minister. I want to like them. I want them to do well because I want our country to do well, and 100%. I want to be proud of it. Yeah. And so I have tried to find times with Keir Starmer and to go, but there's nothing I can't hang on to anything. And I think there are millions of people out there. I would love, again, this is something, get a Vox Pops going. Go and find people and get them to sell Keir Starmer to me. Like, what do you like about him? And there's nothing, because with someone like Rishi, even, or Boris, I won't count Liz in this, certainly with Boris, that you could go to a Vox Pops and there'd be people like, I loathe that man. I want him nowhere near that job or number 10. He's despicable. Yeah. And you'd find people who love the guy, who absolutely love him. And with Keir Starmer, I don't think there's anything that anyone could bang their hand on the desk and say, he's brilliant because of X, Y, Z. Yeah. And he's been in the job long enough now. Like, I'm sorry. I know the Tories were around for 14, 15 years. He's been in this job long enough now to be able to look people in the eye and say, hey, look what I did. Look what I can do.
Spot on.
And he can't.
Yeah. And, of course, I know we keep talking about the May elections, but it is worth a reminder. They are just 17 weeks away. 17 weeks. And every single projection, every poll, Oscar, is predicting utter carnage for Labour.
Yeah, absolutely. And for your listeners and viewers, this is really depressing because they need to be aware of this, because the blood that can be smelt amongst a whole host of cabinet ministers and others in the Labour Party. Some of the people who are doing the most important jobs for us, running our transport, health service, just overall governance, they're spending a decent whack of their time, not on making this country better, but plotting and planning and campaigning post-May for if and when Keir Starmer does leave. And that is... and look, let's not be too political about it. The Tories have done that.
Sure.
The Tories have been part of that. But that is hugely, if you're just trying to get on with your life right now, that should be of huge concern to you.
And so should this as well. Final story here, Oscar. Will have to be brief, but the Prime Minister, of course, shutting down speculation about his future is one thing, but that push to closer alignment with the European Union is another issue, of course. We are talking about all sorts of questions like rejoining the single market or possibly customs union, the youth mobility scheme, etc. Let's have a listen to what Keir Starmer said on these very issues.
Steps.
But what's next?
We've already taken steps on food and agriculture to align with the single market. That's the sovereign decision that we have taken. I think we should get closer, and if it's in our national interest, to have even closer alignment with the single market, then we should consider that. We should go that far.
There it is. What does it mean in reality? You know a bit about sort of double speak, Oscar, when it comes to politics. What is he really saying in there?
Not personally, of course.
No, not personally.
Purely
As a merely objective onlooker, of course.
That means it's on from his perspective, and there'll be meetings happening right now to try and make this happen. He hasn't just thought of that off the top of his own head. And actually, the double speak really what it reveals is utter desperation, because the economy he has not been able to charge, and he will see that as a route to improving the economy. Of course, it won't work like that. Of course, the EU will somehow fend off Keir Starmer's charisma and charm and make sure that any deal was incredibly painful for us as a punishment. Yep. I tell you what, I'm very skeptical about the whole unite with the right kind of vibe that's out there. But if we really did align in a formal way with the EU once again, that would be a surefire way, I think, or as good as chance as any to unite the right in this country. And electorally, from Keir Starmer's perspective, that would be the biggest moronic own goal. But hey,
I mean, in terms of like rejoining Europe, look, I don't think he's quite suggesting that. But of course, understandably, there's a lot of cynicism around this lot, and the suggestion, I suppose, is that it's sort of incremental, that he'll do this almost by instalments.
Yeah, and the customs union. The single market is 70%, I would say, of what it would be to be rejoining the EU.
Of course.
And so if we did do that formally, he's gone nearly the whole hog in one fell swoop. And what an insult. And again, it speaks to, let's remember where Keir Starmer's head was at in 2016 and 2019 when he wanted second referendums. It is the epitome of a class of person who run parts of the country that think they still know best. Yeah. Whatever you guys went out and thought you voted for in 2016,
it's exactly
we know best.
Yeah, underneath it all, it's the kind of Plato's noble lie thing. You can say it because it's fine, because it's we know better, so we can come out with all this bluster and nonsense, because ultimately we'll do what we need to do because, as you rightly say, we know best. We are of a certain DNA, a certain type of people. And
just lastly on that, just connecting it to all the geopolitical stuff that's going on, with America and China and et cetera, not being in the EU was why we got ahead on Ukraine, and not being in the EU, I feel, would be a benefit to us when it comes to America.
Correct.
Because we are going to need that strong big brother, and we'll need to move quickly.
Absolutely spot on. Listen, on that point, Oscar, thank you as ever. Oscar Redrop, former number 10 advisor to Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. We've got some American voices coming on shortly as well. Laurie Laird joins us, Virginia Tuckey. Rick Gates is on too. Stand by for all of that. Over to you. Has Trump played a blinder here? Did he make the right call? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Brian says, come on, Ian. Trump, like Starmer, get real, mate. He simply goes through the motions with the minimal amount of courtesy and respect for a man he knows is weak, wet, woke weasel. He would crush under his shoe if he was not the UK Prime Minister. On a serious note, I was speaking to somebody, as the phrase goes in my industry, a White House insider, you know, a source, a contact, whatever you want to call it, who said that they get on very, very well, and they like each other. And I said, well, surely you're mistaken. It's Keir Starmer. But I think that like comes from no contest, no danger. You know, his man's not in the league as me. That's how Trump would see it, I'm sure. But it is curious, Brian. You're absolutely spot on. So over the weekend, we know that the president stunned allies and critics alike by ordering that operation that led to the capture of the Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. It triggered, well, I think some could say, an international backlash.
This was one of the most stunning, effective, and powerful displays of American military might and competence in American history.
Yeah, I think that can safely be said. In the UK, the fallout is political too. Keir Starmer facing pressure from Labour MPs to condemn the move, even as he stresses Britain had no involvement. And he doesn't stop there. The former president, of course, is also reviving controversial ambitions closer to home, setting his sights on Greenland and raising fresh questions about America's direction under his administration.
We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you. The European Union needs us to have it, and they know that.
I think there's some confusion.
Well, there it is. That's the president speaking. Let's get a word on this. Shortly, Laurie Laird will join us, Virginia Tuckey too. First, Rick Gates, former deputy campaign manager for Donald Trump back in 2016. Good afternoon to you, Rick. Nice to have you with us. Your assessment, if you would, sir, over the weekend. What did you make of it?
Yeah, Ian, great to see you. Look, I think it's been a tremendous success. I think this is, President Trump being his best, his strongest. This is what he likes to do in terms of, trying to establish and stabilize order around the world. And look, there's no secret. He's been talking to Maduro over several months. He gave him many opportunities. I think he lost patience with Maduro. And I think if you look at the initial reaction and just the euphoria from Venezuelans across the globe. And more importantly, I would say the lack of really intense backlash from our adversaries like Russia and China and Iran. Sure, there's been some, but it's not been to any extent to what I thought it would be if this had not gone as well as it did. In the U.S., I certainly think because there were no casualties on the American side, it was quick, it was swift, it was decisive. The American people are somewhat very supportive of it at this time.
Yeah, indeed. And I think the general rule of thumb, Rick, is that if China are outraged, then it was probably the right thing to do. There is that. But I guess the area that perhaps has made some people sit up and question isn't so much the removal of this man. These, horrendous people that are, 1,300 miles from the southern tip of Florida. It's, essentially very close, doing all sorts of things in terms of curtailing American commerce. There's lots of American companies have, lost a lot as a result of this man's running of Venezuela. All of that, I think most people support. The bit that seems to have upset some people, including some very right-wing Republicans, is this bit about we are now running Venezuela. Is that just a Trumpism, or is there something more definitive in that statement?
No, look, I think the president's been clear. I mean, when you come in and you do a decisive move like this, you're not just going to sit back and not take any further action. I think he's going to be, and the U.S. is going to be intimately involved in the restructuring of Venezuela because we don't want to see it fall and collapse as it was in the process of doing. So whether you interpret the word run as going in and controlling or whether the U.S. is going to be intimately involved in those actions, that's up to each individual viewer. But I think at the end of the day, this is starting a chain reaction in Latin America that is going to, I think, be further, supported by Trump's intent to cut down on drugs, to make sure that we have energy independence. Look, this is part of his agenda. This is, it wasn't specifically spelled out as, hey, we're going to go out and take Maduro out. But he's been very clear on the agenda that he has set forth in making America energy independent. You're already seeing gas prices in the U.S. They've been going down, but I think they're going to go down further. And I think you're going to see a different type of reaction. This is different from kind of Joe Biden's approach to Afghanistan, which was a botched withdrawal because they didn't really have a plan. Here, Trump was very clear in what he did, and I think you're going to see that moving forward, and you're going to look for other countries too, like Colombia, Cuba, others that are on the precipice of following.
I was having quite a good afternoon until you mentioned Joe Biden. I'd forgotten all about Sleepy Joe, but he's always there as a point of reference, I guess. In terms of where Mr. Trump goes next, what does the president do? This talk of Greenland, we heard it in the little clip we just played. That is one that really does divide the room. A lot of people going, hang on a second, Greenland, really? I mean, this is run by someone else.
Yeah, look, I think it's important to really listen to what he's saying versus what the media is trying to put spin on it, right? Just in the clip that you showed, you would think that the media, based on what he said, like he's going to go and invade Greenland. No, what he's saying is, look, there are Russian interests there, there are Chinese interests there. That hurts the U.S. That hurts, more importantly, the EU. And so I think he's looking for a plan, and he's going to take that decisive action, if necessary, to make sure that those interests are protected on both your side and our side of the Atlantic.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say, just a final point, Rick, that, had this not happened, it would have been, in half an hour's time, I think we can safely say China would have been running Venezuela, and that, I guess, is something the president was mindful of as well.
Absolutely. And you look at what they were doing in terms of Hezbollah, gaining roots in Venezuela, some of the other terrorist groups. You look at the drug trafficking. I mean, look, it was an important message to send to the entire region. And that's exactly what's happening. Do you see Cuba, mobilizing their military or anything like that? Absolutely not. Everybody is petrified that they could be next. And I think you're going to see probably more of a falling in line in order to support the president, even if they don't like the president, because they don't want to be next on that list.
Indeed. Rick, great to have you on, sir. Nice to speak again. Rick Gates, former Deputy Campaign Manager for Donald Trump's 2016 campaign. Thank you to him. Virginia Tuckey is a political analyst and chair of Republicans Overseas, based in Argentina. I think it's unfair, Virginia, to say there's a general South American response to this, but of course it is in your territory there in that respect. What do you think the domestic sense is over what happened at the weekend? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. Thank you. Well, in Argentina, it was celebrated. You have to know we have a big Venezuelan community here in Argentina, also in Chile, and all around, because the diaspora is one of the biggest the world has ever seen. You have a lot of people saying, mostly politicians that are involved, maybe in some issues that they shouldn't. They are very worried about what's going on. So they say, oh, international law has not been respected. Well, that's not true. International law has been enforced in this case. All Latin America, including Argentina, Chile mostly, all Central America has suffered the advance of China, Russia, and Iran in Venezuela, also in Cuba. So what the United States has done is completely legal in international law, and also is a very good, it's a very good news for Latin America, for the United States, and even for Europe, because let's remember, Iran is working there using Venezuelan oil, and we all know what Iran is doing around the world. So this is the perspective, and some people are afraid of what it can come out of it, because we have big networks of drug trafficking, human trafficking people, and all that can come out, to the light when Maduro starts talking.
Yeah.
Yes.
This Maduro character was a nasty piece of work. We know that, and that kind of understates it in many respects. When critics argue that, look, any country that, you know, America or anywhere else decides to subjugate or go into for whatever reason, it always ends badly. I'm hearing a lot of people saying, well, Panama is a very different story because there are similarities there, and Panama is almost a shining example of Central South American success.
Well, it is. If you come to South America and you see Central and South America, you just have few countries where you can find peace, prosperity, and when you look around, you feel like you are in a civilized place.
Yeah.
Everywhere, when you go everywhere, not just in some neighborhoods. One of those is Panama. And let's remember, Panama was Venezuela before.
Yeah.
So, yes, I mean, this can be compared to Panama.
So do you sense, and I know you can't speak for Venezuela, but do you sense the average Venezuelan would be rather delighted by what happened at the weekend?
Well, we can see it all around the world. They're in Europe, here in South America, in the United States. In the only place Venezuelans are not celebrating is in Venezuela. Why? Because they have these colectivos. They are paramilitary people, civil people working as paramilitary networks for the government, and they are very dangerous, and they are the worst criminals you can get.
Sure.
And so they are trying to stop the celebrations. But when you look around the world, it's amazing how happy they are. And here's the thing. I was reading all around the internet, Twitter, and talking to Venezuelans. Even people who, and I quote, hate Donald Trump, they are for what he did in Venezuela. So this is the situation. Venezuelans are happy unless they have something to do with this regime that was brutal and was killing its own people and other people.
Indeed, yeah, it was certainly horrific under this character. Virginia, thank you very much indeed for your time. Virginia Tuckey, political analyst. She's also chair of Republicans Overseas in Argentina. Let's get a word with Laurie Laird, US political commentator, regularly helps us out with American issues. Laurie, good afternoon to you. Nice to have you with us. This was, you know, took a lot of people by surprise what happened. Of course, there are implications beyond just America, around the world, even in this country. Keir Starmer isn't quite sure what he thinks on this, it seems, at the moment. He's not quite drawn on, you know, did he break international law, did he not? Starmer's meant to be a senior lawyer. You'd think he might know. I think we might have you muted, either at your end or some other technical hitch there, Laurie. If you can hear us, is it a mute issue? It's still muted. Laurie, I think, is reaching for the mute button. Have we got you back, Laurie?
You had me. I apologise for that, Ian.
That's all right, not a problem. Let's pick up from where we started.
Yeah, so we're talking about Starmer. He knew he was going to get this question, right? We knew he was going to get this question, yet he didn't seem to practice it in front of the mirror enough before he spoke to a television camera. My God, I mean, looking at the discomfort when he was asked, did this break international law? Look, the concept of international law, we talk about it, we throw that term around all the time. Sure. It's a little bit fuzzy, isn't it? But I think the one thing that concerned me about what Starmer said, a couple of things concerned me, but he said a couple of times, let's see what America makes the case at. Let's see, as America lays out its case for nabbing Maduro. America's made its case. They've called him a narco-terrorist, and they've talked about oil. America very plainly made its case on Saturday afternoon. One thing America has not talked about is the restoration of democracy, of people who won the 2024 election. America itself views Edmundo Gonzalez as the rightful president. Yeah. No mention of that whatsoever. We know what America's case is, so why that was a difficult question for Starmer is beyond me.
Yeah, it's curious. As you rightly say, he knew about what had happened. He had plenty of chance to. He's got enough advisors around him, even if he couldn't have come up with an answer himself. Somebody would have said, "Look, you're definitely going to get a lot about this. Make sure you sound confident and forthright with your answers." But he just sounded very, very weak and unsure. He didn't quite. I don't want to upset Mr. Trump, but by the same token, I don't want to upset people on my back benches. And in doing so, he seems to upset both.
I mean, one thing that interested me is that he was he was a bit more full-throated in his defense of Greenland. He seemed to be on much more confident ground there. And that will annoy Trump. I mean, Starmer really doesn't know where he's going with how far to go to appease Trump. And there's a lot of evidence there that even if you can appease Trump for a very short period of time, it doesn't seem to make a lot of difference. Some of the leaders that have been openly defiant of Trump, like President da Silva of Brazil, like President Sheinbaum of Mexico, haven't really been treated any worse. Xi Jinping in China haven't been treated that much worse than the leaders like Starmer, who have tried to present themselves as Trump's whisperers.
Sure, indeed. In terms of Greenland, just on that point, Laurie, I mean, that does seem to be, final point, as quickly as we can, if possible. I mean, that does seem to be a slightly more contentious issue. When I look at what people in the know are saying on this, it's unlikely to happen. But nonetheless, the President of the United States very confidently says, and you heard it in the clip, we need Greenland. It's somebody else's country.
Well, look, the days in which we would say take Donald Trump seriously, but not literally, are gone after the snatch and grab in Venezuela. We do have to listen to him. But I do think this snatch and grab in Venezuela was also opportunistic. This was a failed state. It was not difficult to quell Venezuela as a military. Going into Greenland, I think, is a slightly different proposition.
On that point, Laurie, thank you very much for your time, as ever. Laurie Laird, US political commentator. I did speak to a fella at the weekend who works with some Danes, and they were saying, you know, take Greenland. It costs us a bloody fortune to keep that thing going. That's maybe anecdotal and not the answer to the problem, but interesting that he talks about Russian and Chinese ships floating around the place. I mean, America does have a huge defence-based presence in Greenland as it is. It's not exactly out of the picture. Thoughts on all of this? Did Donald Trump make the right call at the weekend? 0344 499 1000.
Until we start creating deterrence, in other words, arrest, charge, prosecution, and a
pretty fed up with politicians for quite a while now. And I think that is because they just have seen a system that isn't working for them, but it's worse than that because the politicians come in and they say they're going to fix it. You think about the tens of thousands migration, the David Cameron, it's really sort of started since then where people come in, they make these grand promises, and it's that sort of patronising phrase I keep using, the democratic disconnect, where people vote for something and then nothing seems to happen, or in fact the opposite seems to happen.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one comes in from Trevor, who says, as a Trump supporter, what I don't understand is why he doesn't have a huge base in Greenland rather than risking upsetting the so-called free world. After all, just having a huge base, which seems to make everybody happy, especially NATO. I think they do have a huge, I'm trying to think of the name of it, a huge base somewhere in Greenland already. There's certainly a lot of American presence in that respect. So it's not totally out of the picture. But I don't know how, you know, I stand to be educated on how Pitafik, I'm being told it's called. I'm not sure quite how significant that is and why it doesn't tick the box that Trump clearly wants to tick. Let's go to your calls, and thank you, Trevor, for that. This is Carl in Liverpool. What have you got for us, Carl? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon and good new year, Ian.
And you too.
Yeah, I've got no problem with what he's done, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a strong leader. He's done exactly what he said on the tin since he's been in. This guy, if you've looked at some of the footage, this evil man that was leading Venezuela, used his own military, chained vehicles on them and everything. He's a disgusting human being. Donald Trump's freed the Venezuelan people, and that's how it should be looked at. Yes, he's going to run the country, but he is personally not going to run it. He's going to set up a team. But
there's lots of other places, Carl, aren't there, around the world that's got some right weirdos and dodgepots running the country that America wouldn't go anywhere near.
Well, yeah, of course, but I do. You know, you got this is how two contrasting men. They are Keir Starmer and Donald Trump. You had Keir Starmer saying on Laura Koonsbeck, just to tell you, we weren't involved in that. Yeah, we know you weren't, Keir, because you've got no spine.
But then I don't think anybody was involved, were they? I don't think Canada knew about it, and no one in Europe knew about it. So it wasn't as if it was just us that weren't told about it.
Yeah, I don't think Donald Trump doesn't trust people. He especially doesn't trust Congress, because he said about leaks and stuff. You know.
Yeah, of course.
I think he's done a fantastic job, and you know, we need to. This man has come in, kicked the political doors off the establishment, and shown career politicians how to do a job, and not just say the words, but actually do it. And you're still getting the left-leaning side that, oh, he's committed war crimes. No, what he's done is free people. He's free people who were persecuted and killed under their leader. I'm sorry, but in a normal thinking world, that man has done a good job in many eyes, and it's only the left. And I think it's brought out of jealousy, to be honest. And these people that have been in politics for years, decades, that haven't had the stones to go and do these jobs. But then you get Donald Trump, and he doesn't give a hoot. Yeah. He's just come in and go, I'm going to fix these problems, because he knows he hasn't got long left. He's got 4 years, and that's it.
Do you think he's going to? I mean, there is on that point, Carl. There is a suggestion he might extend that and you know, get a new bill passed where he can carry on running. Good.
Yeah, good. I would like to see him work alongside Nigel Farage when reform coming. You know, you had Keir Starmer telling us the other day, I'm going to be in 2027. No, you're not. What are you stoking?
Yeah, he's got to get through May the 7th yet, and that's not going to be easy. Carl, listen, great call to start us off. Thank you for that, Carl in Liverpool. Let's go to Warrington, not too far down the road. Matthew, how are you doing?
Hi, Ian. Oh, we had a good one, mate.
Yeah, good. All good at this end. Fire away. What do you got to say?
Right. You've got to give it to Trump, haven't you? He's got to set a gonads, and he doesn't say no messing about. It's about time we had a world leader who stood up to all these despots and Putin and China. He's not going to set no messing about. And our standing in the world under Keir Starmer is diabolical. Absolutely diabolical. He doesn't care about Starmer. He cares about Great Britain. But we will never, ever, ever have any standing in this world. Why they're there.
Do you think on the wider point, Matthew, do you think our allegiance should be, because it's not a new question, you know, should we be more in tune with Europe, or should we be more in tune with America? What's your gut on that?
We should be in tune with America. Europe is a laughing stock. It's falling apart. It's corrupt. It's bankrupt. It's just politically overwhelmed with rules and lawyers and it's so left wing. It's a shambles. We should be Great Britain and the Commonwealth, and we should be standing on our own, and we should be going to the Trump. What can we do to help? What can we do to support you? Because that's where it's going to be. You can see that the likes of Trump and Vance, they're going to be in for a good while. They're going to change the world. They're not going to set no messing around, and they're just going to leave us way behind, because they pulled out on that major deal, didn't they? The not the Bitcoin. What was the what was it? You know, we'd done a deal with him. And he said it was a multi-billion-pound deal, and he's pulled.
Oh, the tech stuff.
Yeah. Well, he's pulled that out now. He's pulled it from under us.
Well, I think it's on. I think there's a kind of pause situation, but don't hold your breath. You're absolutely right, Matthew. Great call again. Thank you for that. This comes from Steve in East Yorkshire. Starmer's sitting on the fence over Venezuela because if he condemns what the US did, he risks upsetting Trump, and if he supports what Donald Trump did, then he risks upsetting his friends in China. And I'll bet he's been on the phone to China already, especially as he's gone to great lengths to state that the UK was not involved, says Steve. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Do you want Starmer to condemn Donald Trump, or do you want Starmer to support him? Starmer was quite, as Laurie Laird pointed out, he was quite vocal about Greenland. And I think most people agree. And what you have to keep in mind, by the way, there's quite a lot of what you'd call right-wing Republicans, Marjorie being right up there, who, you know, previous huge Trump allies. I mean, she's as mad as a box of frogs, but that's another point. There's loads of right-wing Republicans who are not rating Trump on this particular point, who don't think he's done the right thing, who don't sense that this was the correct move. Not because of removing a despot, and the man in charge over there up until the weekend in Venezuela, you know, was not a nice guy, and he was curtailing American productivity and caused damage to American corporations. I'm thinking mainly oil. I just think it was twofold, was it? Yeah, it was about the oil. I mean, I just have a little read up on the amount of oil that Venezuela sits on. There ain't a country really on the planet that could get close to. I mean, it's huge, and that clearly is where he's thinking. Plus, the American oil corporations are huge and were scuppered under the previous head. So I get that bit. Running Venezuela, putting a new government in, that's a whole different question, right? Where else? Where would you want to send the American president? There's quite a lot of countries around the world I think he could do the same thing in, but probably never would. Thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000. It's 2 o'clock. Let's get the news.
Across the UK, on DAB+, On YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Afternoon and welcome back to the home of common sense. As you will be more than aware, over the weekend it all kicked off over there in Venezuela. Donald Trump stunning allies and critics alike by ordering that operation that led to the capture of the Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro, triggering a bit of an international reaction, some of it you might say a backlash. There was, however, quite a lot of support. Did Trump make the right call? We'll continue to take your comments on that. Also this afternoon, Keir Starmer pushing for closer EU ties. I know your radar pinged when you heard that. He's proposing a youth mobility scheme and easier work agreements. It sparked accusations, of course, of what they call a Brexit betrayal and some party unease from his own backbenchers. Your thoughts on that and details to come. And the Trades Union Congress is urging employers to allow staff to work from home during severe winter weather, as snow and ice has caused widespread disruption across the United Kingdom. I mean, it hasn't really, is it? It's just it was a tiny bit of snow. It's cold. It's January. It's winter. It's meant to be cold. I love this weather. It's a season being a season. But it shouldn't stop you from going to work, frankly. Everything you need to know, we'll bring you all the breaking news as well, right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Deborah says, as if Trump would ever inform Starmer about his plans. He behaves like a dictator and can't be trusted. History shows what happens when leaders take the path that others eventually move to take over from them. Simple as that, says Deborah. We'll take more response on Trump. Did he play a blinder? Was it the right thing to do? Do you sense that Donald Trump really knew what he was doing here and the reasoning behind it was absolutely spot on? If that is your thought, then we'll take more comment on that. You might be critical. And also this, on domestic matters, Keir Starmer signalling a bit of a push for closer alignment with the European Union. Now, naturally, any time a British leader now goes to visit anyone south of Brussels or even makes a phone call with Ursula, straight away there is that, hang on a sec, what is he doing? Is he trying to get us back in there? He rules out rejoining the single market or the customs union. The PN, though, has floated a youth mobility scheme and is seeking agreements to make it easier for British professionals to work across the EU. Moves that have naturally prompted a Brexit betrayal from critics and those with a bit of an unease within his own party.
Steps.
But what's next?
We've already taken steps on food and agriculture to align with the single market. That's the sovereign decision that we have taken. I think we should get closer, and if it's in our national interest, in our interest, to have even closer alignment with the single market, then we should consider that. We should go that far.
That's what he says. Let's firstly speak to Richard Kilpatrick, Campaign Movement, European Movement UK. Good afternoon to you, Richard. That's it. We're back in, aren't we? Full members of the EU, done, dusted and sealed. We are now back to where we began in, 2016?
Yeah, listen, well, first off, Ian, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year too.
Listen, I think, don't we all suffer for a little bit of PTSD whenever we talk about this, no matter how you voted in 2016? I think the first thing is to say, listen, regardless of how you voted in 2016, if we're looking at what's beneficial for British business and what's beneficial for you and me and our families and our economic future, what can this government do actively and proactively to help us? And one of the things is to look at closer alignment with the single market. And actually, I'm glad that this government is talking about it possibly instead of the customs union stuff. And not that both are mutually exclusive, by the way, but like the single market by far, and all the statistics would suggest that the single market is the one thing that would make a significant difference to UK manufacturing, to UK business. And Ian, one of the things that I do in my day-to-day job is I speak to as many businesses, UK businesses, as possible. And I'm not talking about those big multinational faceless corporations. I'm talking about those small to medium enterprises, the ones that are quite frankly the backbone of our economy. It's the place that, my parents would have worked for and families up and down the country would have worked for. And the one thing the one thing that they say would make a meaningful difference to them is access to the single market. Now, we don't really know what that looks like. It's the first time the Prime Minister has really mentioned it, and I think that's where a lot of frustration comes. And I can understand why you might say that a lot of people may feel like, oh, you know, this we're just harking back to the debate that we had almost a decade ago, Ian, which is pretty significant. Yeah. But actually, you know, where is the detail on this? That's the challenge that I have to the Prime Minister.
A previous guest said to us, Richard, that actually, you know, if you're in the single market, you are about 70% in the EU, because that is the big one. Now, for many people who voted to not be in the EU, that would be a betrayal.
Well, first off, I can't imagine that if you spoke to the people of Switzerland, if you spoke to people of Norway, they would say that there were 70% within the EU. There are lots of different mechanisms that are in place. And I think this is actually half the problem with not being detailed, not showing that leadership, is what does it actually mean to align to the single market? Now, there's also the suggestion that, quite frankly, you know, people didn't necessarily vote to leave the single market. People voted to leave the European Union. Now, Switzerland is not a member of the European Union. Norway is not a member of the European Union, but they both have access to the single market. So we have to be very, very clear about what we're talking about here. And I think this is half the problem. We just have this level of confusion.
But of course, there is a freedom of movement aspect that comes with that as well.
There is a freedom of movement aspect to the single market, yes. But if you look at the option of Switzerland, which, again, not to hark back to 10 years ago, we were having this exact debate, weren't we? There would have been people who were advocating leaving the European Union who were saying, well, hang on, why don't we look at the Swiss model? Why don't we look at the Norwegian model? Well, actually, we have to apply the same logic now, don't we? The Swiss model has certain breaks on freedom of movement, where if freedom of movement is not working for the Swiss people, they have the ability to break from it, or temporarily break from it. So there are things that can be put in place that can elude some of the fears there. But actually, Ian, just really quickly, we talk about freedom of movement like it is a bad thing. Obviously, freedom of movement has immense amount of opportunities for the British people, just as it has immense amount of opportunities for British business. Again, those businesses that we speak to every single day, the hospitality businesses that exist on all of our high streets, the one thing that they say is they are desperate to have that sort of freedom of the labour market back so that they can have people working in their businesses and contributing to the economy and paying tax right here in the United Kingdom.
And I guess, though, Richard, I mean, even, you know, from your perspective, just being objective on this, you know, perhaps some of the cynicism around this is that we know that Keir Starmer is about as signed up, hypothetically, to the whole idea of the EU as any human being could be. He clearly tried to agitate the process when the original vote went through. He wasn't alone, but he was certainly at the forefront of it. And that's where his heart is, right? I mean, his heart is in that whole EU super dream, the collective, the being part of that kind of cartel of EU leaders. It's in his bone marrow almost.
Well, listen, Ian, I'm not one to defend the Prime Minister or the Labour Party, actually, for that matter. But, I mean, I actually would love him to be a little bit more clear on where he stands on this sort of stuff, really, but from maybe a slightly opposite perspective from other people, you know? I think he must be doing something right if he's upsetting me and upsetting people who voted to leave the European Union as well.
Yes.
But actually, like, what's really important, what I really hope that he puts first and foremost, is the economic future of the British people and British business. If there's one thing that he could do that could actually impact those businesses and help grow our economy and actually align ourselves with the largest trading bloc in the world, and of which almost half of our trade is done with this trading bloc. If there's something that you can do to break down those barriers and listen to British business, and if it means access to the single market in some way, shape or form, and it's very clear to make that clear that it's access to the single market. We don't know what that looks like. We don't. It's not necessarily membership of it. If that's going to help British business, and he puts that first and foremost, then great. I'd support that move. But we need to see what that detail is.
We do indeed, Richard. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Richard Kilpatrick, campaign manager for the European Movement UK. Let's speak with Liam Deacon, communications consultant, former head of press for the Brexit Party. What are you taking from this? Because each time, look, I think we all want as closer relationship to our benefit with anyone around the world, whether it's the EU, America, Australia, whatever. But it's not. This is different, isn't it? In this respect, Liam, because we've been there before, so we know what could happen. And this is the suspicion that when Keir Starmer, he's talking in riddles and curious political conundrums, really, when he talks about, yes, I want to be closer, but I'm ruling out this, that, and the other. We don't really believe him.
It's just classic Keir. It's painful incrementalism. Now, your previous guest, I admire his enthusiasm, and he made the case very well. But I think what he described in detail was what I call the worst of both worlds deal, where we have no democratic input into European Union institutions, but we take all of their regulations and restrictions on our businesses and our daily lives. He claimed that Switzerland isn't 70% in the EU, but it is. It is roughly 70% in the EU. They take complete open borders and free movement with the EU. Yeah. They follow nearly all of their regulations. I mean, he said that manufacturing businesses and small businesses were crying out to leave the single market. This is the one thing they asked for. What businesses are saying this? Businesses are saying they want lower tax and cheaper energy. Yeah. Okay. These are two things that we have the power to do outside the EU, abandon net zero targets and slash our tax rates. But we haven't done any of them. We've pursued this sort of painful incrementalism. Now, just to rewind a bit, I think we need to understand a bit perhaps why Keir said what he said. And I actually don't think much is going to happen here. I do think the primary thing to understand with what he said to Koonsberg on the weekend was to do with Labour internal politics. Yep. You have to remember that David Lammy and Wes Streeting have both said they want to rejoin the customs union. That would breach a manifesto pledge of the Labour Party. But he's already, noticing they're losing voters to both the Greens and the Lib Dems, and he needs to come out on the side of this sort of pro-EU block of voters. So he said something vague about incrementally aligning with the single market, and basically he mentioned that lawyers and people like that who trade services within the EU will have an easier time. And I think he's making it very clear whose side he's on there. Like, he's a former lawyer. He believes in sort of a service sector economy for the UK. Where actually, when you look at the interests of like industry and working class jobs, they want cheaper energy and lower regulation, which is the opposite. So he's putting himself on the side of lawyers. Keir Starmer's, known for doing that. But I mean, we've already had this reset. He's already announced this reset, which amounted to signing our fishing away for another 12 years, decimating our fishing towns for another decade. Some kind of youth mobility, easier at airports, things that the middle classes enjoy. He's already announced these things. He's not going to dive back into it. But I think the key part of this, the really depressing bit, is that we left the EU, and the first sort of group of people to try and deliver Brexit hated Brexit. It was Theresa May and her government, and they tried to keep us basically completely in it. And then we had Boris Johnson, who was just chaos. And I question whether or not he really believed in it. But we've never had anyone in government post-Brexit who really believed in the post-Brexit vision of Britain. Yeah. And the point that Keir Starmer made quite convincingly, he made the argument that the promises of right-wing figures during the referendum campaign, such as claiming that immigration would fall and money would come back to the UK, have not been delivered. He's right about that. He's right about that. Those things haven't been delivered. In fact, when you look at immigration, we quadrupled it after leaving the European Union. And that's not because Brexit was a bad idea. That's because the people delivering Brexit fundamentally don't like Brexit. Okay, we've never had someone that energetically believed in the vision of Brexit. Okay, the closest we came to it was when a raft of huge bits of EU regulation were put before Kemi when she was Trade Secretary, and she had the opportunity to burn hundreds of bills and deregulate the economy. And I'll be generous to Kemi here. Basically what happened is a load of civil servants talked her out of it, and she didn't do it. So we've been out the EU all this time. We've quadrupled immigration from outside the EU. We've not meaningfully deregulated. We've not made anything better. So it's no wonder now that people like Richard, the previous guest, are able to stand up and say Brexit's not really doing a lot. So what we really need is a government in power that's actually going to believe in this thing and make it work.
Indeed, and that's what has always been lacking. And in fact, if you talk to the Reform Party, Nigel Farage himself said we haven't really got Brexit yet. So there is the central problem. Liam, thank you for your time. Really appreciate that. Liam Deacon, communications consultant, former head of press for the Brexit Party. Your thoughts on that? Our previous guest had suggested that you talk to most businesses and they're crying out for a greater alignment with another trading bloc. I'm not sure that is strictly true, because of course when you talk about a single market, you're not just talking. I mean, this is what happened at the very beginning, isn't it? Back in the 70s, a single market. That sounds a bit tasty. A single market. There's a market that you can be part of. That's great. It doesn't come without caveats and T's and C's. There's a ton of them. The terms and conditions, the harmonisation of rules and regulations is absolutely vast. And there's the problem. That's often been the sticking point. When you look at freedom of movement, by the way, and that issue, it's only when you look back then to what we have now, you think, actually, EU immigration, which was people, you know, fairly transiently coming across to the UK, might have spent a couple of years doing a job here, some settled, that no longer looks like the immigration problem that we talk about today, which is a very different one. That looks like the immigration problem or the immigration position that you're kind of all right with, mostly. But you take the point. What we have today is an absolute bloody mess. And the other thing I keep hearing is people saying, well, yeah, but our economy would be X amount of tens of billions of times bigger. And actually, if you crunch those numbers, these huge figures that get thrown around, I think Andrew Neil wrote about this at the weekend. If you took those figures as gospel, that the sort of Remainers argue this is the difference it's made, then our economy now, based on their own mathematics, would be sort of twice the size of America. I mean, it's nonsense to suggest you can just take that figure and say, well, we'd be that much bigger, definitely, if we were still in the EU. And I'd also remind you, whilst this country isn't doing fantastic, there's very few EU countries that are doing any better at the moment. So you can't lay our woes on the European Union. You can lay them at the doorsteps of number 10 and 11 Downing Street, and you can do that very convincingly and with confidence. So your response on that, do you sense, I know it's a question we've probably asked many times before, do you sense that this is Starmer tacitly having a little knock at the EU door? Can we come in, please? I won't say it out loud, but that's what I really mean. Is that where he's at? 0344 499 1000. We're talking about Venezuela, Donald Trump's incursion, shall we say, soiree, journey, landing, whatever you like, into Venezuela at the weekend, talking about running the show to a degree. What do you make of that? Here's a voice note, comes from David.
Afternoon, Ian. When a failing socialist state locks up its own people for criticising the government, when the government fails to use its own natural resources to benefit those people, and when the government decides it wishes to keep its people poor, then America should come in and take over and run it. And as for Venezuela, they're just as bad. I bet Starmer had a picture of Maduro on his bedroom wall.
I love that idea, yeah. Oh, Nicholas, I love you. On a daily basis. Maybe he did. Thank you very much indeed for that. 0344 499 1000. More calls from you coming next right here on Talk.
Until we start creating deterrence, in other words, arrest, charge, prosecution and a suitable punishment, nothing is going to change. The police can do all their performative policing, which they're such big fans of. Oh, this week we launched a shoplifting initiative in Altrincham and we arrested 17 people, for example. Yeah, that's great, but the shoplifters know that they're here today and gone tomorrow, so they go back to their thieving ways.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
One in from Will who says, it's one thing to get rid of Maduro, but quite another to dictate how Venezuela runs. If Trump was wise, he would encourage a fair and democratic elections and leave them to it. Unfortunately, Trump is not wise. Attempting overseas regime change has never been a US strong point. That's absolutely true. It's never been a US strong point. I think Panama would perhaps be the only example. But if you want to start at Vietnam and work forward in the history books, then you will see, some fairly horrendous stories on American incursion. What I think distinguishes this, however, from some of those elements is where we're at in the sort of geopolitical sense of the word. China, who are running, if they see a basket case around the world, they don't laugh at it and ignore it and just go, it'll go away at some point, it'll become democratic. They think, well, we could democratise that. Well, a Chinese version of democratise. We can do business there. And I think that was the sense, and the oil factor should not be. I mean, I said this during the original Iraq war, when people went, it's all about the oil, it's all about the oil, as if that was a bad thing. I mean, it was to a degree about oil as well. And Venezuela absolutely is about oil. And you want to know that somebody on your own doorstep who's running the show is going to run it in a way that is amicable with your values, when your companies are being curtailed and kicked in the shins left, right and centre, as they were under the previous administration. But yes, it is still, I totally agree, it's an uncomfortable fit to hear a leader of one country say, we're going to run this country, and Greenland as well. Even if you love Trump a bit, if Marjorie is uncomfortable with it, and she's about as right-wing, formerly pro-Trump as it gets, then that kind of gives you a bit of a picture. Let's get a voice note on that issue of Starmer and the EU. What is he up to? This comes from Sue in Macclesfield.
Hi, Ian. I'm so angry. I can't believe that Keir slimy Starmer is going to take us back into the EU. I and 17 million people voted to leave the EU. I just think this government is an absolute waste of space. They need to go. They're dangerous, and they don't support or think of the population of this country. I think it's disgusting.
Thank you, Sue. I can hear the incredulity and the annoyance as well in Sue's voice. Thank you for that. This comes from Nick, who says, when will Brexit's dwindling cheerleaders finally admit what an expensive folly it has been, and how many billions it has cost us? I breeze through the EU line at Pisa Airport on my EU passport as I thank the Lord I have dual citizenship, while British travellers queued to have their little blue passports stamped like third country nationals, which is what they are. This was after a very much delayed flight from Gatwick. So tell me, what exactly is the upside of Brexit, apart from longer queues and shorter horizons? But I doubt you'll read this out. Go on, I dare. We'd have to dare us, Nikki. I mean, if you didn't send stuff in like that, we would have no show. That's the whole point, is to read out a range of views. From Nikki, who's in Kent and in Italy, but not simultaneously, because that would be some kind of witchcraft. I think the problem is, as our previous guest Liam had said, is that in terms of a full Brexit, hasn't quite happened in the way a lot of Brexiteers envisaged. So I get that point. I think the second point, I've been into EU countries since 2016. I've never really had the queuing thing, by the way. The queuing thing can still happen when you're in the EU. Queues did not disappear through being in the EU, and I have memorable moments of being in the EU and queuing horrifically at European airports. So that bit, the queue at the airport test, is a bit of a weak one. But I hear what you're saying, Nicky, and if somebody is pro being in the EU, I get it. The bit that I can never get over, and it's a really simple and maybe too simple for a man of my meagre thinking, is that the EU is not a law of physics. It doesn't. There's countries outside the EU that do very, very well. India does very, very well. It's not in the EU. Australia, you could go on. Japan, you don't have to be in the EU to make a success of it. I think fundamentally, it was about democracy. It was about saying, actually, all of these decisions, and the EU didn't run all of our laws. That was also an urban myth. You have to be honest on both sides of this. But obviously, when it came to trade and issues such as that, and some people are fine with this, I'm sure Nikki, we just heard from, is fine with this as well. By definition, if you're in those single market situations, then you take the rules and the regs and the T's and C's that come with it. And for many people, that was a step too far. Then there's the expansion ambitions of the EU as well, when it comes to military, when it comes to police services as well. There's those issues. And if you go to talk to leaders in many countries in the EU over the years, I can remember Chancellor Scholz, I think it was. Chancellor, which one was it? It was Chancellor Scholz, I think, who, when asked, is the EU really about sort of creating a United States of Europe? And he just said, yeah, of course it is. It's exactly what the point is. And there was no denial of that. Almost wearing it as a badge of honour. He wasn't lying. He was being absolutely honest. So you have to take that side of it as well. Let's go to Cindy in Michigan, in the United States. Cindy, good afternoon to you. Nice to have you with us. What are you making of what happened with your president this weekend?
Good afternoon, Ian. Yeah, you know what? I totally 100% support what Trump did. He's a strong leader. He knows what he wants to do, and he did it. He warned Maduro, but I'm also frustrated with Keir Starmer. I'm frustrated because he's being so typical Keir Starmer. I'm sorry to say, but he reminds me of the backbone of a wet noodle.
Yeah.
He's not saying anything, and we're allies. He needs to come out and strongly support Trump. We're allies. We need to have a united, strong front in front of the world. Mm-hmm. And by his silence, it's just demonstrating that he's weak.
Yeah.
Weak.
What are your friends, colleagues telling you over the last day or two about what happened in Venezuela? Does there seem to be mostly support for what Trump did?
There's a lot of dismay right now, but like my husband totally supports what Trump is doing. I support it, but I am seeing like on Facebook there's a lot of, but I have a lot of left-wing friends. Mm-hmm. So the left-wingers are, of course, not support. They don't support anything that Trump does.
Well, he could give everybody a new Cadillac and $5 million, and they wouldn't support him, would they? So.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so they're just not going to be happy, Fair but point. The people, and as typical, the people who like Trump are supporting this. It's split down the middle.
Sure.
As always.
Always, yeah. It'll be interesting where it goes next. On that point, Cindy, thank you very much indeed, Cindy in Michigan, because you can wear more than one hat on these things. We've lost the beauty, the ability to wear more than one hat. That was always the difficulty is if you do wear more than one hat, you're accused of sitting on a fence. It's very rare that one definitive opinion is going to be 100% correct, no matter which angle you analyse it from. And the truth usually does sit somewhere in the middle. And I know it's not quite as antagonising, and, antagonising debates are often, some of the most gripping. But there is something in that, isn't there? That you can wear more than one hat. So the Trump thing, I look at it and I was a bit, I was out having drinks with some friends on, was it Saturday? Saturday afternoon / evening when that news broke, and then the next headline came through. Trump says we are running Venezuela, and I just thought that's a bit weird, right? That's a bit strange. Whatever's gone on in Venezuela, he's running it. But then you start to sort of analyse the wider geopolitical reasoning behind him running it, and it does sort of make sense. So it's something you wouldn't have desired or designed for that to happen. But if you look at the wider reasons and you take into account particularly China, Iran and all sorts of other elements of the story, you kind of go, it sort of does. There's a common sense to this as well, even if it's hugely unconventional and profoundly unpalatable to many people. You can see the logic of this. As for the UK, are we in a better place for a president that makes that kind of decision? And in a curious way, I think we probably are. I genuinely think, notwithstanding my previous thoughts about how bizarre it is to hear one leader talk about someone else's country in this way, I think, broadly speaking, if this country can get its act together, I've always said this, I'm more of an Atlanticist than a European. I don't get it when people go, I feel, I don't feel American, by the way, but the idea that I feel European, I don't even know what that means. What does that mean, I feel European? I don't get that. It means nothing to me at all. Even if you support the EU, I still don't understand how you feel it. It's a desired disposition to kind of prop up your belief in the EU. That's all that is. I feel like I'm a European first, and then secondly, I'm a Brit. Oh, get in the bin. Well, how often did we hear that? I don't know what that means, but I do think that our sanity and our safety right now is better aligned with the United States than it is with the European Union, which seems to be all over the place on all manner of issues. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about the snow in a second. The snow is scuppering. The country has closed down because we had... how much snow did we have? What was the worst snowy place? I mean, even in the worst place, it was about half a foot of snow, wasn't it? Never got that bad. Come on. Country's closed down. People want to work from home. We'll talk to one former head of a leading trades union in a second on that very issue. Stand by for that. Just gone 2:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Alan in Yorkshire says, schools have closed today because of a little bit of snow. In 1955, schools would never close. Snow, ice, even smog. The British bulldog spirit. Yes, kids were sent to school in ice cubes, essentially. Didn't matter. Nobody had radiators anyway at home. It was probably warmer at school. What has gone wrong? And today we hear more on this very issue, that the Trades Union Congress is urging employers to allow staff to work from home during severe weather conditions as snow and ice cause widespread disruption across the UK. Transport badly affected, sub-zero temperatures recorded overnight, health alerts in force. Unions say workers should not be penalised if conditions make travelling unsafe. Let's speak with Kevin Rowan, Director of Dispute Resolutions at ACAS, former head of Organising and Service Learning with the Trades Union Congress. Kevin, good afternoon to you. Nice to have you with us. Are you working from home today?
I am working from home today, Ian. Yes, I'm based in Newcastle. It's pretty white outside, but in ACAS we have hybrid working, so working at home
Indeed
is a fairly regular occurrence for me, as well as going into the office and various
Sure.
locations.
I mean, you're the right person to talk to because you're all about resolutions, of course. So, you know, how do we resolve snow? Because here we are. We have this conversation almost every year, don't we? That, you know, and this is largely separate from the specifics of working from home. But stuff in this country does kind of come to a grinding halt the minute the white stuff lands.
Yeah, it does seem to be something where, annually incapable of dealing with.
Yeah.
As you say, I mean, there are obviously extreme weather conditions that do make travel for most people quite difficult. But it seems, you know, when there is the slightest dusting of snow, as you describe, it can cause havoc in some parts of the country, and in those circumstances, then you know, employers and workers and trade unions have got to work out what the best solution for them is.
Yeah, I get that, and literally, I can't remember how many years ago it was. Maybe 7, 8 years ago. I remember it snowed. I literally couldn't get out of my house, Kevin. I mean, I genuinely, you couldn't drive a car. I live on a slight slope, so couldn't drive a car in or out of it. You couldn't walk down the streets. There were no trains running. I literally, quite literally, could not get to work, and that's understandable. I suppose the questions start to come thick and fast when it's not about that, but it's about an employee saying, you know, it's quite cold out there, so I don't want to go to work. That's a different argument, isn't it?
Yeah, and to be honest, Ian, that's not an argument that we tend to hear. I mean, certainly, it's quite rare, I think, when people feel unable to get to work because of the weather conditions. You know, that it's rare, but it's not unheard of. And in those circumstances, then we would encourage employers and employees to find a solution that applies a bit of common sense, a bit of flexibility where that's possible. Clearly, it's the employee's responsibility to get to work if they can.
Yeah.
But in those extreme circumstances, then we would encourage them to talk to their employer to kind of explain the situation, and for the employer to be as flexible as they're able to be. Now, some employers will have arrangements in place for these conditions. Lots of employers, as you indicate, have hybrid working, home working arrangements. Lots don't, and in those circumstances, people can feel a bit vulnerable, a bit unclear about what they should do for the best.
Yeah. Do you sense this year is any different? I mean, we haven't really. I mean, there is some snow. We've had some. You're in a different part of the country. You've got some snow there. But, you know, we've all seen it far worse than this. Has anything changed for the Trades Union Congress to be sort of making noises about employers being more understanding of their staff?
I'm not sure that there's anything particularly changed, except that there is a greater prevalence of flexible working and home working now. I mean, post-COVID, you know, it's much more common for employers to offer those flexible working arrangements. Obviously, that doesn't apply for everybody. If you're in, you know, you work in cleaning services or in retail and hospitality or security services or some of our frontline public service workers, then it's not practicable for you to work out. But it certainly is much more common that employers are adopting those flexible working arrangements.
Indeed, yeah, and yeah, working from home is a whole, you know, it's just a phrase in the English language now that perhaps wasn't there in previous years. Kevin, thank you for your time, sir. Really appreciate that. Kevin Rowan is Director of Disputes with ACAS. They're the Advisory, Conciliation and Arbitration Service. Thank you to him. How much of a tough old gig is it when it's? I mean, the fact that it's cold, and man, it's cold. I mean, really cold. I was in Bulgaria at around about April last year now. All right, it wasn't midwinter April, but you know, there's still a lot of snow around and people skiing and stuff like that. It was around about 10 degrees, I think. And when I took the dog for a walk this morning, I mean, you know, even wrapped up, it was properly cold. And I loved it. I thought, yes, this is winter. It's a little bit icy every now and again. Now I'm over 40. You've got to watch those hips. So I didn't want to cack over. So you've got to be mindful of that. I think that's called common sense. I don't need a government or some big sign or a, you know, no-go zone poster put up anywhere. I don't need to be told to stop going to work unless, of course, the trains aren't running, which is something that does happen. On Friday, by the way, can I just get this right? Last Friday, separate point here. So last Friday was the day after, January the 2nd, wasn't it, last Friday? So I did the breakfast show last Friday. Even Alicia, who was producing that day, I use that term rather loosely, but she was producing. I left here at 10 o'clock in the morning, go over to the railway station, which is a spit from where we work, and I looked up my train, and I thought, that's a bit weird. It said on the big notice board, ask staff, and I thought, oh, hello, we're in for some trouble here. And I looked on the app, and it said, yeah, there were trains going to Sevenoaks, but it was going to take me just shy of 2 hours to get there. This, by the way, is a 23-minute journey on a good train. 2 hours? What's gone on? And so the woman said, oh, mass engineering works, all penciled in. And I thought, no, but last Friday was a normal working day, wasn't it? There was no bank holiday, was there? Or no holiday. Like you have New Year's Eve, which is also actually, I think, a working day. New Year's Day isn't. That is a holiday. But the day after, what kind of transport company decided they were going to do such huge engineering works that they would literally make your journey 4 times as long? And that involved changing trains, by the way, about 3 times. And it was bloody cold, which meant jumping in a cab. And, of course, that's hugely expensive. Can't claim it back. That's the way it worked. Well, you could give it a go. But you take the point. And this is the sort of country we're in. We're just not very mindful of joining the dots. Oh, well, it sort of seems to be between Christmas and New Year, so we'll just close the railways, shall we? No! You don't close the railways, you half-wits. You keep them running. Do your engineering work some other time. Chris is in Epsom. Chris, what have you got for us? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Happy New Year to you and the team.
Happy New Year to you. Donald Trump, has he played a blinder here or made an error?
Yes, without a doubt.
Go on.
You've got to remember that when Chavros nationalised the oil fields and the oil company came out with PDVSA,
Chavez, yeah.
all the oil still flowed to America because the refineries there were set up to deal with exactly that type of heavy crude, all right? Now, that oil has flowed all the time. It's never stopped. Under Chavros or Maduro, it's never stopped.
Yeah.
But they have done nothing on the infrastructure. They have done nothing with the money that they've got. The actual percentage of what they're getting out the fields now is something like about 15%. Now, there was a deal offered that said that we'll let the oil, we'll carry on taking the oil and do this. And it was a deal offered 2 weeks ago, but Maduro chose to ignore that deal. And he had, don't forget, the day before, the American military pulled off that wonderful exercise in how to do things. The Chinese were there. You got the Chinese and the Russians wanting that heavy oil, and Trump can't have that in his background, in his backyard. The other thing is that where do you think the 8 million Venezuelans have gone, all right, that have legged it from the country because it's in such dire straits? They've all gone to America. Now, he shut the southern border. So now you've got a build-up of South Americans on the Mexican side of the border. So Mexico would be supporting this, right, without a doubt. Because if he does what he says he's going to do and hand democracy back so that they can have a proper fair vote and the people can do what they want and they can get on with their lives without being ruled by diktats, then people can return from America back to Venezuela. It'll also stop the other ones going up there. The other thing is that people keep talking about the drugs. There's very, very little fentanyl that goes through Venezuela, very little. It's all flown into Mexico from China, and it's the precursor material.
So do you think Trump didn't need to use that argument, that he was being a little disingenuous by talking about it's about the drugs?
He knew about the drugs. I mean, the cocaine has been... I used to go to Crackers quite a lot 25 years ago.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful place.
Sounds it.
It was a fantastic place. Now, the thing is that the cocaine is now... Colombia is not the biggest producer of cocaine in the world, which everybody keeps going on about.
Yeah, of course.
Peru is. Peru employed the best bioenvironmentalists, and they produced a cocaine plant. If you look into it, you'll find it. They produced a cocaine plant that can now grow at sea level. So what they're doing is, because Peru is so impoverished as well, and they have one helicopter, they've got tens of thousands of square miles of jungle. they cut an area of jungle down and produce coca. And that all goes up via Suriname and French Guiana, because from there, when they export it to Europe, it's classified as a European import.
Right.
So it doesn't go because they're European territory.
Did you say Peru's only got one helicopter?
Yeah, one helicopter.
What, the whole country?
Yeah, for the military and police. Yeah, they share a helicopter.
Wow.
But that was 18 months ago, so that may be out of date now.
Yeah.
The Suriname and French Guiana, when exports come into Europe, they're treated as European imports, not South American imports. So they don't get very strict controls on the importation of the containers.
Yeah.
The rest of it goes up through Guyana, which got overrun with drug cartel people, and into Venezuela and up into Mexico.
All right.
So now he sent a message to all those South American countries whose dictators are relying on the cocaine trade, right, for their money.
That he's coming for you.
He sent a message: get your house in order.
Yeah.
Or you're going to have trouble.
Yeah, but why would he have the right to say that to a country?
Because I think he's also, with Russia and Iran and China backing Venezuela, I also think he's averted something similar to the Cuban Missile Crisis of '61. Because they could have wanted the oil and put stuff in Trump's backyard, and can you imagine what would have happened then?
Yeah. It's a fair point. Chris, on that point, I've got to move. Thank you for that, Chris in Epsom. We have been crunching the numbers behind the scenes. Faith, who's one of our producers here, she's also Special Research Development Officer for Smackhead Data, crunched the numbers, and apparently Colombia does still produce more cocaine than Peru. So there's that. And we have it on reliable authority that there is more than one helicopter in Peru. Although I think Chris was referring to military and the police. Apparently they don't share helicopters. I'm now hearing they've got 100 helicopters, got 1,000 helicopters. No, I'm now hearing everyone in Peru owns a helicopter. All 34 million people. But I think I broadly take Chris's point about the kind of lackadaisical nature of running Peru. I hear him. Thoughts on this? 0344 499 1000. On the single market question, the Brexit starmer, the incremental beast that is Sakir. Vince says, the single market didn't help the UK before the UK left the EU, so why would it help the UK now? The EU is 26 countries out of 197 in the world. We don't see other countries fight or trying to join the EU. And your guest is wrong. The biggest trading bloc is the Commonwealth, with 57 countries, or a third of the world's population. So the UK is better off out of the single market and trading with those who want to trade with us. That's true. I mean, if you add it up collectively as a single bloc, I mean, we don't want to be... we need to trade with the EU. It's absolutely flipping massive. But no one's saying we can't. We don't need to be in a single market. We literally do not need to be in one. If anybody says, no, you've got to be in it, we don't. We literally do not. That's just a fact. You can take your choice of whether you'd like to, but whether we need to, no, absolutely. Anyone who tells you that is telling you lies. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Until we start creating deterrence, in other words, arrest, charge, prosecution and a suitable punishment, nothing is going to change. The police can do all their performative policing, which they're such big fans of. Oh, this week we launched a shoplifting initiative in Altrincham and we arrested 17 people, for example. Yeah, that's great, but the shoplifters know that they're here today and gone tomorrow, so they go back to their thieving ways.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
We're about to talk to Jackie in Oldham. Before we do, the Voice of Doom is back. It's day 6, kind of rolled over from last year, right? Mystery voice, but it's political. Very simple question. Who is this?
Going to be community relations.
It's a bit of a stinker, but we always say that, don't we? Someone eventually gets it right. Have another listen.
Going to be community relations.
If you think you know who that is, don't be phoning in, but you can message 87222 if you fancy having a crack at that. 87222 if you know who this is.
Going to be community relations.
If we get a right answer, we'll tell you after the news. Jackie in Oldham. Jackie, how you doing?
I'm great, thanks, Ian.
Good.
Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year to you too.
President Trump, I think he's played an absolute blinder.
Okay.
And the icing on the cake is the laughter and meltdown globally about this.
That's always amusing to see that position played out.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And it's as though, you know, without any warning, he just snatched him off the street.
Mm-hmm.
What they don't realise is that in 2020, Trump put a bounty on Maduro's head then. Biden, in his administration, raised the bounty, and then when Trump came in for the second term in 2025, he raised it again.
Yep.
And the public reason is narco trafficking,
Mm-hmm.
but it's geopolitically very astute what he's done, because Maduro was getting very, very close with China, the 60 billion in debt to China.
Yep.
They were selling them cheap oil, which was obviously, you know, making the Chinese a lot more rich and powerful.
True.
There was interference with the arms with Russia. So in one foul swoop, he sent a warning shot out to China and to Russia and to Iran, you know, that I will take you on, I will play you at your game. And now China have got an import problem, you know, where they're going to get the fuel from. So I think that Trump, when he says, I'm going to run Venezuela, I think what he's meaning is that the oil is not going to be cheaply sold to China, for China, you know, because they've been making recent noises about Taiwan, you know, and I think geopolitically, what he has done makes us all a lot more safer.
So it's wider, isn't it? Than it's more. This is a global statement for obvious reasons, rather than just, we know it's not to stop a few grams of Class A coming into Mexico or Florida. It's much more than that. This is bigger. Yeah. And I that's the point where he's right, because this is, we're in perilous times as a globe, aren't we? We haven't been here before, really, in this sense, where the dominance of China. I mean, China was a country that, although, we knew it made a lot of stuff, and mostly that cheap, tacky stuff that we buy from Amazon, etc. But now, it's dominant. It's globally significant, and at its current rate could become the most dominant economy, and therefore politically dominant, on the planet. And that's the bit that Trump's got to head off somewhat.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll watch with interest. Jackie, thank you very much indeed for that. That is Jackie in Oldham. Brad in Cambridge, at reference Trump, says, it's so embarrassing that spineless Starmer needs to ask his mentor Macron what he thinks before giving us his own opinion on Venezuela. At least Farage just gave a straight opinion. Whether it's Ukraine, Palestine or immigration, Starmer is incapable of doing anything on his own, says Brad. And that's what happens, and thank you, Brad, for that. I think you're bang on. That's what happens when you buy into the whole groupthink kind of mentality. It's in your bones to do that. Well, not what do I think, what are we, the collective, meant to think? Macron, Schultz, you name it. What are we all supposed to think? Oh, right, I'll just gauge what the view is. No, give us your view. And Farage's view was not massively, overtly positive to Trump in some respects. You take my point. It was tacit. I think he called it, was it unconventional, but words of that nature. But he just gave his view. With Starmer, well, we'll have to have a look at it. Give us your view, man. Get angry. Either way, get angry. It doesn't matter whether you love it, hate it, endorse it, or refute it, whatever. Just get animated. Be your own man. Have a view, have an idea of what you think about it. Can you imagine a Trump-like character sitting in that chair opposite Koonsberg being asked those questions and dilly-dallying over the answer? Good Lord. Coming up, the voice of doom. Who is this?
Going to be community relations.
87222 if you know, hopefully after the news.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Welcome back. It is the home of common sense. As you've been hearing, of course, we are discussing the issue of Donald Trump. Stunning allies and critics alike by ordering that operation that led to the capture of the Venezuelan leader, the now then Venezuelan leader, Nicolas Maduro. This has triggered a bit of a backlash from all manner of areas. Was he on the money? Did he make the right call? Thoughts on that? We'll continue with your comments. Also this afternoon, the government is stepping up immigration enforcement with a border force set to seize phones from small boat migrants in Kent, targeting people smugglers and those facilitating crossing. You know what is laughable about this? Do they not already do that as a matter of course? If I write the wrong thing on social media and the old bills show up, the first thing they'll do is nab my phone. If I illegally row across the channel, I get to keep my phone without somebody having so much as a little look at it. You know, even running through your contacts list. Details to come. And at least 30 dangerous patients freed from secure hospitals have committed murders since 1993. Most are released within 10 to 20 years, often after secret tribunals that victims' families cannot attend. This has prompted calls, understandably, for transparency and tougher sentencing. Yeah, who makes the call on an absolute, and I don't use this as a pejorative, an absolute madman who's carried out horrendous crimes, and then you discover, oh, they've been released, but I didn't know anything about it. But they killed a relative or a friend, and they served 10 years. And there is no evidence to suggest they've been rehabilitated. Well, in 30 cases, they weren't rehabilitated because they went on to kill. 0344 499 1000. Lots to get through here. Voice of Doom with you shortly. Have we got a correct answer? Find out in a few moments. And let's go back to that story of Border Force set to seize phones from small boat migrants. This apparently is to target people smugglers and those facilitating the crossings. Meanwhile, the Home Office faces embarrassment after twice deported Albanian burglar was seen partying in central London while awaiting removal. You sort of have to have a cheeky little snigger at this stuff. It's beyond belief. And in a separate controversy, a court ruling may make it harder to evict asylum seekers from hotel accommodation, sparking renewed debate over the effectiveness of the entire system. Let's get a word from our friend Tony Smith, former head of the UK Border Force. Afternoon to you, Tony. I don't know if you heard, but I said right at the beginning there, I mean, I think most of us would sort of assumed that your mobile phone would be taken and inspected the minute you landed in Dover, but apparently not.
Yes, I was a bit surprised by this story. I mean, as you know, I've been out of the Border Force for a long time now, but my understanding is that all people arriving on small boats into the UK are arrested, either under Section 24 for a prosecution or under administrative powers, and that therefore you have already got powers in place to seize articles. These powers are being pronounced as pre-arrest powers, so I can see they'll be more valuable perhaps in country where you haven't got grounds to arrest somebody who might not be an illegal immigrant, for example, but may have a mobile device or a SIM card on them that might be a human smuggler. I think it's all part of their strategy to try and smash the gangs, if you like, and get evidence against smugglers. But in terms of actually, you know, deterring migrants from coming across on a small boat, as you know, many of them destroy their mobile phones anyway.
That's true, yes.
Before they get here. And I'm not sure that this is going to stop the boats. I can see why they're doing it. And it is a symptom of the Border Security, Immigration and Asylum Act, Ian, which did become law last month and is now, these provisions take effect today. So I think that's why it's being briefed out as a, you know, as a toughening up. It's a toughening up in terms of investigations for human smuggling. But in terms of stopping the boats, I'm not persuaded this is going to make much difference.
I hear everything you say there, Tony, and I agree as well. You would just think that if somebody does come across on a boat and they land on the shores of this country and they do have a mobile with them, it would just be procedure that, you know, you don't know who the person is, you've got no idea what their name is, you don't know what country they've come from, they could tell you, it may not be true. It would be just standard practice to take the phone, you know, you don't have to pin anybody down, just automatically take the phone, like you would in so many other areas of illegal activity. The police would look at your mobile device or your tablet, whatever. We see it all the time with social media posts. And you might be able to glean some information from that. You'd think that would just happen, but apparently not. Well, we'll watch this space to see if they have any success with it. It is worth talking about another couple of failures in the system, Tony. The Home Office, as I mentioned, facing embarrassment after a twice deported Albanian burglar taunts authorities from a bar in Mayfair while smoking a shisha surrounded by burlesque dancers. I mean, seriously?
Yeah, from what I can understand from that story, and I've only, read what you've read about him, he's in the appeals system, Ian. We have discussed, in other words, he is in breach. We would deport him if we could. He's claimed asylum, which has been refused. But as we discussed before, there's a 54-week delay in hearing asylum appeals, and we can't deport people whilst their appeal is still pending. So whilst he remains in that system, unless his appeal is expedited, then I'm afraid there's not very much that the Home Office can do about removing him.
It's that speed, isn't it? The speed with which these things don't happen, and the impediment process along the way, which rather brings us to this. Go on, do carry on, Tony.
No, I was just going to say, Ian, that is a worry because the Ministry of Justice are responsible for the appeals system thus far, not the Home Office. So we quite often point the finger at the Home Office, which is my old firm. But actually, if you do refuse someone really, really quickly, even within a couple, there's still a very, very long wait. So I'm hoping the new Home Secretary, having come from Justice into the Home Office, can do something about that. And let's get this end-to-end process speeded up. That's what she's going to do. But I just think that means getting these appeals dealt with a lot more quickly than they are. Otherwise, we're going to see more cases like this guy.
I mean, I know, we're not a dictatorship. We have systems in place for good reason. Prime Ministers don't just wake up and go, right, we're going to change the entire system now. You put it through a few hoops and hurdles before you can just autonomously make those decisions, even if you are the Prime Minister. That they can, of course, have, massive influence on what happens. But things like this, and the story of Lord Justice Bean, who's always criticised as a bit of a left-leaning judge. I don't know whether that's fair or not. He was the one that presided over the Epping Hotel, the Bell Hotel. In fairness to him, he wasn't presiding over the rights and wrongs of whether migrants should live in your postcode or not. It was about the legality of the terms of use of the hotel, of course. So we can't blame him for that bit because he wasn't trying it on a moral basis about immigration. But there is a case where apparently he's blocking evictions from some of those when departure orders have been put in place. And you think, well, how does that happen? If there's a departure order in place, how does it then again go back to another judge? I assume the judge goes, well, it might be right to let this person go, but you haven't done the correct paperwork or something like that.
Yeah, and I think, that's another thing we've spoken is judicial intervention in the process, and this is another symptom of that, where we do see that it's very common now for those that would support migrants, unlocking them. Of course, there are plenty of people that want to support migrants and asylum seekers will take to the courts with a judicial review action against some act or omission taken by the Home Office. And that has become almost standard practice now. It's a huge industry, asylum and immigration law. There are a huge number of lawyers out there who can access judges. The judges will apply the law in the way they see fit. The problem we've got in the Border Force and in the Home Office is that, we cannot put the Home Secretary in contempt of court. If we do anything, Ian, anything that might go against a judgment like that, then you can bet your bottom dollar that whichever official has done that will be hauled over the coals immediately for potentially putting the Home Secretary and the Home Office in contempt of court. So it does go back to the system about what are we allowing, when are we going to allow judicial reviews to take place? How firm is our judicial process? How strong is the democratic government in being able to do some of the things that it wants to do without being challenged, all the time in the courts, which, as you say, just quite often goes against public opinion and goes against sometimes even what the government wants to do.
Absolutely spot on. Tony, great to have you with us as ever. Happy New Year. Thank you for coming on. Tony Smith, former head of the UK Border Force. And in fact, there are quite clear cases where judges make wacky decisions. But I do have a sympathy with some judges, and I'll come back to why they shouldn't ever be in this position in a moment. But if a lawyer looks at a client's case where the client has been told, right, you're going to be deported, and the lawyer says, this is not correct because you can't deport my client because of this, or this, and it might even be an administrative reason, then it goes to a court. Now, the judge has only got one choice, in the example I'm giving. And that the choice is to work out whether the law has been correctly implemented. And if the law hasn't been correctly implemented in connection with someone's deportation, then the judge can't go, yeah, it's fine, if it's not fine, because there's no point in having a judge otherwise. You know, judges do make those nuanced and incredibly complicated decisions. If it's about, right, the paperwork says you've got to do A, B, C, D, and E, and the application to deport someone has only gone up as far as A and B, then the judge has no choice but to go, well, no, you haven't done it properly, so you can't deport the person. It's not about being left-leaning. My point is this, that it shouldn't get to the judge in the first place. If somebody has gone through the mill and they've got it absolutely bang on and the paperwork is there, why are we dilly-dallying, taking it back to another court and saying, no, if you've got to somehow tick this A, B, C, D box or whatever the heck it is, change the boxes. You know you've got a wrong one on your hands, all the evidence is there, that's already been established. And this person is going to be deported. You don't think, well, actually, there's another 7 appeal processes. You can go through whatever you like. You can keep it going forever. Years, in some cases. 0344 499 1000. Your thoughts on that. This one comes in from Anthony, who says, if Starmer had 5% of the backbone that Trump has, we would be in a better place. Starmer's latest TV interview shows he still thinks of us reform voters, as far right, and quite frankly, we are totally sick of it now. I genuinely think that, and this would be extraordinary, bearing in mind Starmer's a lot of things. He's not stupid, you know, he's a senior lawyer, and was for many years. So you have to extrapolate from that. He's obviously not stupid. But sometimes intelligent people really are stupid, and that's the point. So, yeah, he might have, I'm sure he's probably quite handy on a pub quiz if the issue was human rights laws. Maybe he's good at that. And I'm pretty sure he knows Arsenal quite well, his team. I get that. But actually, when you consider when Starmer came in, now not last year, the year before, 2024 in July, we all thought he's got a grand plan. I mean, who wouldn't have a grand plan when you've been in opposition for 14 years and you've been running your own party for 5 of them? You'd hit the ground flipping running, wouldn't you? And he didn't have a plan, and they weren't very good. He genuinely thought not being the Tories was enough to make him popular. And so did the people around him. And so did all those other Labour MPs. We're not the Tories, therefore what can go wrong? Well, what can go wrong is that you've got no ideology, no philosophy, no direction, no template, no grounding, no idea with what you're going to do. That's what went wrong. And the same with all of this as well, that there is an absolute problem here with his belief on reform voters and reform as a party is that this country will never go there. They won't really do it. Why are you saying that, Keir? All the opinion polls are saying otherwise. Even if you're a Labour supporter, that should be acknowledged and taken very seriously. Don't worry, kids. We'll wait till May the 7th and see what happens. 17 weeks away, those local elections. It's going to be interesting. Mark's in Manchester on the point of Donald Trump. What do you think, Mark? Afternoon.
Oh, afternoon, yeah. I just think that I think the question you've asked is whether he's right or wrong.
Yeah.
I think the question should be whether he's correct or incorrect. I think some sort of moralistic bent on this. I think we're past that. I think we're into some sort of resource grab scenario with the Chinese and the Russians. And I think we've got to back Trump whether we like it or not. I think the final thing will be whether the Americans can control the narrative and keep it on the fact that Maduro is evil and the regime was based on some sort of incorrect election. I think the Chinese and the Russians may well agitate against this, and if the Americans start to lose lives like they did when they pushed their imperialist tendencies in after the post-war, I think they need to learn those lessons. But we've got to stay on his side because there's no choice. I mean, the world is becoming more and more divisive, whether you look at the Israeli-Palestinian thing or whether you look at the Chinese, Russian and American thing. Yeah.
Well, I mentioned at the beginning to our first guest about sort of 1984, as in the Orwell book, where the world was divided into 3 kind of regions. I mean, it kind of feels like, it does feel a bit like that.
It definitely does, and I think, like you said before, I think the reason he's gone into Venezuela is primarily the oil reserves there. It gives him a very, very strong hand moving forward from a resource potential perspective.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, massive for his economic fortunes.
Yeah, massive, huge. And I think the Chinese and the Russians may well agitate against that, like the Sandinistas I think they may be supplying arms and that in the future. But that's going to be in the next 5 to 10 years or even maybe earlier. And if the Americans start having to back up the oil pipelines and the refineries that they're going to build there with military installations and stuff, then it might get a bit messy. But hopefully he'll get away with it.
I think so. We're going to, I mean, that phrase, watch this space, has never been more poignant than in this particular conversation. Mark, thank you very much indeed for that. I mentioned 1984. 1984 is, look, I'm not a student of literature or any of that kind of stuff and didn't go to university, but I did set out some time ago to go, I'm going to try and read those kind of, the titles that everyone bangs on about, those, with 7 brains talk about, whether you're reading Nabokov, whether you're reading The Great Gatsby or 1984, all that kind of stuff that's seen as the greats. And so I read 1984 years ago, and I reread it about 3 years ago, and it is, without doubt, the scariest book I've ever read, for a whole number of reasons. And usually we talk about it in the kind of Big Brother sense of, the all-seeing eye, the surveillance society, digital ID feeding into that, CCTV cameras. Biggest story, by the way, are doorbells. Don't let you tell you any different. Doorbells, I promise you, we are surveying ourselves. We didn't need the state to do it. And your phone thrown in as well. Oh, and the camera on your computer. Oh, and the one on your telly as well. We paid for them. We bought into it. But it's not, in this case, 1984 is this kind of world, this totalitarian world that's divided into Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia. And they're in perpetual war, as it were, and over land mostly. It kind of does. I don't want to go tinfoil hat on you, but it does feel a bit like that when Trump talks about Colombia and throws a firework up the trouser leg of Peru, as Chris, our previous caller, mentioned, and Greenland, and you think, what is he marking out here? What is he expanding, and what is the purpose of that expansion? And if he's doing that, what are the others doing? When you look at Russia and you look at China, what is the end game there? And then you look at the other countries. And we would be Oceania, by the way, in this story of 1984. Where do we want to be, if that's the direction of travel? Is that too much? Does that go too far down the old David Icke route? Maybe it does. 0344 499 1000.
breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, do these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from Neil. We're going to do the voice of doom in just a second. The payoff. Have we got a winner? This comes in from Neil, who says, Happy New Year, Ian. I am in some ways a Trump fan. I admire what he's done with immigration in the US, but when it comes to his foreign policy, I'm seriously concerned about the future of the world. I honestly think there is some kind of deal in the background between China, Russia and the US. China, you can take Taiwan. Russia, you have Ukraine, and we'll have whatever else we want. If he really treats his allies like Greenland, stroke Denmark, with threats, then he can't be trusted. This man is a threat to the free world, and I would say this as someone on the right, not some left-wing loon. It concerns me the number of people coming on to Talk, and my close friends, all reform supporters, says Neil, who think Trump's rhetoric is okay, but it's not. Yet we can't. I think you've got a point there, and Neil has sort of kind of subscribed to my sort of 1984 thinking a little bit, in that sense that has there been a deal carved out on this? Nobody should be jubilant, going, yeah, it's great, good old Trump just went straight in there, got the bad guy, bought him out, fantastic. It's a much more serious conversation than just that. I get, I understand that he's a strong guy. Doesn't make you a correct guy because you're strong. And I've always said, the way he talks, the response, his kind of thing, his vibe on how he announces policy, it's not always conventional, and when he gets it right, it's so bang on, it's so pitch perfect, almost beautiful when he shoots from the hip and speaks the truth and with passion from the pit of his belly. That's the good Trump. That doesn't mean that he's done good on immigration, as Neil says, which is also true. That doesn't mean everything else follows that shouldn't be tested and correctly debated. And I think this one is one of them. I mean, the Greenland thing is just a bit weird. Yeah, we're going to take Greenland. We've got to take Greenland. Really? Where are you going next? The Isle of Man? Let's do the voice of doom before we go any further. Just before the news, we played you this voice.
Going to be community relations.
Very simple question. Who is it? Did anybody get it correct? These are some of the guesses. Liz Truss. Does sound a bit Liz Trussy, actually. Can we hear it again, Amy?
Going to be community relations.
Yeah, it's not Liz Truss. Sarah Pochin, no. Amber Rudd, no. Priti Patel, no. Lucy Powell, no. We haven't got a right answer. It rolls over to tomorrow for day 7. Back to your calls. This is Dillian in Newport. How are you doing?
Hi, good afternoon, Ian.
Good afternoon to you, sir.
I'm a Trinidad and Tobago national, living here in Newport in the UK. And what I can tell you, a lot of the international community is looking in from the outside. It does not know the reality of what the neighboring countries feel. Just about 2 or 3 months ago, Maduro was trying to annex the Essequibo River and half of Guyana without provocation. You have Trinidadian fishermen being kidnapped at sea and held for ransom in Venezuela by the cartels. You have businessmen being kidnapped in broad daylight and taken to Venezuela for ransom. We have...
And probably never seen again.
Correct. We have also, if you go with like a case of water or a bale of toilet paper, you can get cases of brand new guns at Venezuela. That's how poor the country is.
Wow.
Because of Maduro. So everybody, both in Trinidad, Guyana, Venezuela, everybody's happy to see the back of Maduro.
True. Was this the way they want? I mean, I don't know how you get rid of a madman. I don't know if there's no rule book out there that you can buy in Waterstones that says how to get rid of a madman. I mean, they could have just sort of sat on top of a building and shot him, I suppose, without him. That would have been an option, maybe. But this was obviously to make a bigger statement. The question that now remains, of course, is what next for Venezuela?
Well, as Trump would have said, rightly said, that he's willing to work with them to restore some sort of democratic system, within the country. And we are only too happy for that, because half of Venezuela migrated to our country under the last PNM regime and has not left. And what they brought with them was their barbaric ways. We have people in our country that we don't even know exist. So it's something like here.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's just on and on. So a lot of the international community that is on the outside looking in, and are saying that Trump would have broken international laws.
But it was you think it's for the right reason, even if he did?
Well, it is for the right reasons, but newsflash, because of international laws, that is why we here are in the mess that we are, where you can't deport.
Correct.
You can't take control of your own country.
Yeah, because of some wacky law that somebody made somewhere else yonks ago.
Because of all these international laws.
Yeah,
so
it's a great point.
We are glad to see Maduro's back.
Yeah.
100%.
I love it. Dillian, great call. Thank you, sir, for that. This one in from Steve in East Yorkshire. Starmer's sitting on the fence over Venezuela because he condemns what the US did. He risks upsetting Trump. And if he supports what Trump did, he risks upsetting his friends in China. I think I've read this one out earlier, but happy to do so again. And I'll bet he's been on the phone to China already, especially as he's gone to great lengths to state that the UK was not involved. And he didn't even have to say that, really, but he felt the need to say the UK, as if it might have been. Extraordinary times. I thought what Dillian, our last caller, said was really interesting and quite poignant, that, this international law thing, you're not meant to break it, common agreement globally around the world, etc. But there are times when the circumstances dictate otherwise, and that's clearly where Trump found himself. Paul is in Manchester on this point. What do you got for us, Paul? Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Hiya.
I'd like to speak about Trump, if I may. Sorry, it's the topic of the day.
Yeah.
In my respect, allegedly, the Americans are just warmongers, mate. Wherever they go, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, now they've done Venezuela, they're on about going into Colombia, then now they want Greenland. Where does this all end, mate? You know what I mean? When do we say... by the way, Greenland's not in the European NATO, so where does it end, mate? It's...
Yeah, well, there is a NATO element, isn't there, to Greenland because of Denmark?
Yeah, of course. But like I said, they bought Alaska in 1867 off the Russians. Are they a paranoid state? Do they think they need to rule the world? Do they want to rule the world?
So do you think Trump made a massive error here? Was it an error in getting rid of the guy, or was it an error in suggesting he's going to run Venezuela?
I'm happy with what he did. I really am.
Yeah, and I think most people support that bit, but it's the second bit.
If he can stabilise the government there, Ian, and it becomes a decent country, then he'll move from there to Colombia. I think it's about drugs and...
Well, it's about drugs, it's about sort of geopolitical control, it's obviously about oil as well with Venezuela. If you look at Trump's comments about Gaza, for example, just to go back to that region, then, his idea of, making this a sort of a country like Israel, modern and, forward-thinking, democratic, all of that kind of stuff. Obviously, he's not going to have his casinos that he talks about, but I think that's where he's at. Panama was a good example. That had an invasion from America.
Of course it was,
and it's right up there now. It's looked at as a shining example of that region and how well it can do. Great call, Paul. Thank you very much indeed for that. 0344 499 1000. Oh, by the way, a reminder, there's money to be had. I forgot to tell you this a little earlier. We're giving away, it's like the big welcome to the new year giveaway. It's 26,000 quid. £26,000. What better way to kick off the year with a chance to win some serious cash. By the way, I don't know why it's 26,000. Is there a reason it's 26,000? Is it because it's 2026? Simple as that. Yeah, I suppose it is, isn't it, really? What better way to kick off 2026 with £26,000 is the point. It's our biggest New Year cash giveaway, and it could be yours. 26k for 2026. Here's how you enter. For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. 83338. Text the word TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or call 0343 423 9761. Lines closed 12 p.m. on the 9th of January. That's this coming Friday. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings, okay? This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's can be found at talksport.com/win. talksport.com/win. So for your chance to win 26,000 quid, 26k for 2026. It was obvious, really, why it's 26 grand. Do, as I mentioned, just text the word win to talk text the word talk to 83338. 83338, and 26,000 quid could be yours by Friday. Just gone 3:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is 25 to 4. Now, I mentioned this a little earlier. Truly disturbing story that at least 30 dangerous patients freed from secure hospitals have killed since 1993. Most are released within 10 to 20 years, often after secret tribunals that victims' families can't attend. This has prompted calls, understandably, for greater transparency and tougher sentencing. Emma Webber joins us now. She's the mother of Barney Webber, of course, who was one of the 3 people killed by a paranoid schizophrenic in 2023. Valdo Calacane was considered someone of minimal risk, despite authorities noting his increase in violence at the time. Emma, good afternoon to you. Thank you for being with us. Stories like this are disturbing enough, but when you discover that someone had a history of something, then, of course, that really does increase the horror of what has happened, because you're naturally drawn to the conclusion this could have been stopped.
Yeah, it's the fact there, Ian, that there were multiple occasions where this monster should have been stopped, and gross failures by at least 2 police forces, at least 2 hospital trusts, potentially the university themselves, and I won't go into what family members etc. could have done. But as you probably remember, we've got the statutory inquiry that begins next month now, and that's going to begin to address that. But yeah, I know what I'm on here to talk to you about today today is yet another disturbing fact in this whole disturbing world that's now been unleashed upon us. And yeah, these individuals, not only are they not treated properly and managed properly and looked after properly, they're also, once they are stopped after a heinous crime, they're patients, they're not prisoners, they serve no penal element, and more than half of them are out within 5 years. This isn't minor mental health crimes. These are serious. These murders. These are multiple murders, and these are individuals that are almost certainly going to be out within 10 years. But
and
it's interesting.
You kind of wonder, Emma, don't you, at what, because each time something awful happens, and the details, it's usually over a few weeks, they begin to trickle out, and then court cases will reveal much more. You look at the case of Callacane and you think, in whose world, who was the person who picked up a pen like this and signed off this person is fit for release? We are confident they're not going to go on to do anything awful, like kill somebody. And of course, that's exactly what happened to Barney and friends that night. How have you managed to kind of square that circle in your own head as to what was going on? I mean, to write it off as just a bit of human error, that would be refuted, because clinicians would say, well, at the time we were confident. How do we begin to get an answer or resolution to this?
Yeah, it's how long have you got to have me on your show, Ian? Because it's very complex, it's very detailed, but effectively what you said, it's that person with that pen, and in our case, there are countless people with countless pens who it's as simple as, and I try to simplify this because it becomes really complicated for myself, let alone the general public. But these are individuals, these are highly trained, highly paid professionals in the healthcare industry who they chose to discharge him because he didn't turn up for appointments. They chose to not do proper risk assessments. We still have not been given the grace of knowing on the 4 occasions that he was sectioned whether it was one individual that was in charge of his treatment and then discharge, or 4 separate individuals. But these are people who don't do their jobs properly. And that's the horrifying tragedy of all of this. If the medical professionals had done their jobs properly, the doctors, the mainly psychiatrists, the hospital managers, but also those in charge of institutions such as the 2 police forces we know that failed to do their jobs properly, then Barney would be alive today, and Barney would be celebrating his 22nd birthday on Sunday. So that's the stark reality. And we're coming up to 3 years in. But by God, Ian, it's not just us in our pursuit for justice and addressing the miscarriage of justice. This is about public safety, and this isn't just about parents of teenagers who are at university and going out and enjoying their lives, or in Ian's case, up early in the morning to go and do his job. This could happen anywhere at any time, and it consistently does. And once these individuals are captured, we didn't even have the dignity of a court case. We had a sentencing hearing, which was an absolute disgrace and a joke, really. And the sentencing where we were told in the courtroom, and it's publicly available, it's unlikely that you will be ever released, Valdo Callacane. You'll be unlikely to see the light of day again. That's just not true. They should have also caveated and said, here are the facts, and actually 99% chances you're going to be out within 20 years because you're a patient, you're in the hospital system, and once you're cured, well, not cured, sorry, that's entirely wrong. You can't be cured of schizophrenia, but once you're deemed well enough, then you'll be out. And that's another hidden court tribunal.
Could it almost be, and I obviously can't speak with qualification in this respect, Emma, but at least in some cases, where clinicians have kind of almost overestimated their own brilliance, if you like, in looking at a patient and thinking, yep, they're fine. They almost want to see, there's a sort of curious projection bias, even though it's hugely misplaced and dangerous, in thinking, this patient's done well, they're great, they're in good shape now. Do you think it could be something crudely as simple as that?
I think there's likely that element. I think there's going to be the use of lack of resources, lack of beds and availability, and those who can treat. But that's utterly inexcusable to use any of those as excuses. I think doctors are they take the Hippocratic Oath. They're there to heal and to help, not to retain and punish. So I think there's that element. But to be told that this monster, when he is able, he can apply himself for release, and for it's not just release, it's they are also allowed out into the community on like a vetted leave type perspective, which happens before they're back out again. The decisions that are made, and the people that make the decisions to let him out, are the people that failed us in the first place: hospital managers, psychiatrists, and it's what has to be brought into the public domain is the fact that the overuse of diminished responsibility, that there is very, very rarely a proper hybrid penal element given, where you are treated, you are successfully in a hospital, and then you go into the penal system, which is what you should do. This individual murdered brutally, violently, with pre-planned effort, 3 people. He tried to murder 3 more, and had he not been stopped when he was, he would have gone on to do even more heinous damage. So this has to stop. The Alex Davis-Jones, I applaud. Please let me come in and speak with you again. We've spoken on numerous occasions. You're reforming the victims law. You're reforming certainly the penal element and parole system. You have to bring the mental health criminals into line, and we as victims and those that have passed have to have rights too.
How do you, as a mother, and your wider family, of course, but how do you? I mean, when you lose a child in the most horrific circumstances, there's certainly no set of rules that you can continue to live your life by. But does it feel, as far as you can sense, any different that the perpetrator in this case was a patient and not seen as a criminal? Does that make things more difficult? Do you resent that title, that tag being given to someone?
Yeah, I think what's really important to state is that neither Ian or Grace's family or ourselves, all of the Webber family and our extended network, we do recognise that Callaghan was mentally unwell. Of course he was, and he had an awful condition. But the majority of people that have that condition manage it adequately and recognise they have it. He knew he had it. He knew that when he took his medication, he got better and he could cope. And as and when the facts come out about this case, about not only the abhorrent lack of proper care and attention given from the hospital, mental health hospital trust, but also from the police force and the university in dealing with his escalating levels of violence. I think to be told that he's a patient and he's in the hospital system, he's in receipt of his benefits still, we know he's likely to be out within 20 years. And I have to say, Ian, over my dead body will Valdo Callaghan ever step foot on free turf again. I can't let that happen, for Barney's name, for his brother's name as well. That Indeed. We're going through living hell. And I'm furious, and yes, I'm vengeful, but also I'm realistic, and I have to say this, I will, with everyone else, with the other family members of Grace and Ian, and the survivors, we will make change. Not lessons learned, we will make change.
I was about to ask, on a more personal level, Emma, how are you doing?
On all the medication in the world, trying to adhere to do all the therapy that's been offered to us, and we had to fight for even more of that. I don't know. I'm surviving. I'm coping. The horror that's been thrown at us is so difficult. It's so tough to try and bear, but I think I have to be tougher to bear it. We have to get through the inquiry, and that begins on the 23rd of February in London, and that's going to be, there's a live stream of that every day. It's public, so I welcome anyone that's interested to make sure you're aware of the facts, because the truth is the best disinfectant here, not sunlight, as has been widely commented. And Ian, once all of that's out and the facts are out, then we've done what we need to do as family members, and I do as Barney's mum, because I am not going to stop. I am not going to stop until all of this is properly addressed. And there's proper change in this country, because it has to happen.
Indeed. Well, I mean, let's talk again as well, Emma, nearer the time. And it's just cloaked in so much horror and injustice as well. And that's the kind of, that point at the end there, the injustice of the whole thing, Emma, is really central now, isn't it, to this, is that you want the right thing to happen. But I guess there's always a fear when dealing with establishments, and sometimes, people who will be attending any inquiry who were, part of the very system that you've, very firmly and forcefully and understandably believe let Barney and Grace and Ian down. You're up against all of that as well.
We are just to make the inquiry, Ian. We there are, I think, 13 or 14 what are called as core participants, and a core participant would be a mental health trust, a police force, for example, and they're all lawyered up and KC'd up, and of course you'd expect them to be. But we thank God have an amazing legal team who reached out to support us.
Sure.
And we have got the statutory inquiry, so they will, individuals and witnesses and family members, etc., will be hopefully called up to attend. And like I say, when the truth is out, the truth is out. And
sure.
I assure you, it's the stuff of fiction. The way that we've been dealt with, the narrow shoulders and the long fingers, the complete and utter closing down of ranks and evasion and inability to take any form of proper accountability other than the head tilt, and we're so sorry for your loss and lessons will be learned. So that's what's happened, and no, it's not good enough, and I have to throw everything at this, as does my husband, and as do the other family members, because we've got this chance. And thank you for your continued interest and coverage, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Not at all. It's a pleasure to speak with you, Emma. Thank you very much. And as I said, we will speak again. That is Emma Webber, Barney Webber's mum. Barney, of course, was killed by Valdo Calacane in 2023. A paranoid schizophrenic, didn't take his medication, turn up for appointments. There's a whole list. And Barney, along with Grace and remember the school caretaker Ian Coates, were all victims of this absolutely brutal murder. Where does it go next? And how do you frame it in your head when the perpetrator is described as a patient rather than a criminal? I mean, what do you do with that? And I can't imagine, as a parent, how you frame that or square the circle. 0344 499 1000, 10 to 4. This is Talk.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a talk exclusive we've been looking at. I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, do these people who lead us actually hate Britain?
Yeah.
Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. More comment coming in from you. Stephen Bromsgrove says, is Trump setting up a negotiating position, reference Denmark, talking takeover? Surely if there is a Russo-Chinese, or Russian-Chinese threat developing there, then why don't Denmark and the EU negotiate a solution to suit the US, says Steve. Interesting one. Thank you, Steve, for that. This one comes from Jacques in Andover, who says, your words are extremely misleading. He's not taking over Venezuela. He's stopping a communist dictator and helping to restore democracy in that amazing country. President Gonzalez, which was democratically voted in, can now take charge. Trump did not take over this country. Plus, my mother lives in Caracas, and finally she's free. Well, I get all of that, but he did say we are running the country. Now, OK, in the interim period, and if the interim replacement, the former deputy, now running it, puts a foot wrong, then she'll be subject to the same, in fact, worse, he said, than her predecessor. So, I mean, yes, he's not going to be running it for the next 20 years. But they are calling the shots. They are calling the shots on Venezuela. Now, some might say, well, that's exactly how it needs to be. But there are many people, even in Trump's circle of Republican supporters, that think that is a intervention too far. I guess the overarching response to that is, well, once you've done what you've done, you've kind of got to be there for a bit to oversee it. But you oversee it so that somebody is appointed almost of your choice. And that is the interesting element to this, right? Matt's in Cheshire. Come on, Matt, what have you got for us? Good afternoon and Happy New Year.
Yeah, happy New Year to you, Ian. It was just about Keir Starmer's claim that he's going to be in place and we're all delusional. Ruben Amorim did a press conference yesterday where he said, I'm probably likely to be here for the next 18 months, and he's been sacked today. And I just thought, it's just more or less the same thing. In May, when we have the colossal destruction of Labour across the nation, he's obviously going to get ousted, and they'll put one of the endless people we keep talking about, Rayner or Burnham. Nobody seems to be grasping that everybody in Britain has had enough of Labour and the Conservatives.
Yeah.
And it's going to be 20 years if they're not dead forever after that period.
But can Nigel Farage realistically run the show? And I don't say that against Nigel Farage. I'm talking about the fact that he needs many more people. I know an election will see to that, but many more reliable, trusted people that can form a big administration in charge of defence, home affairs, foreign affairs, those kind of names. And on that point, Matt disappeared. Wow, it wasn't that offensive, was it? It was only a suggestion. Matt, we lost your line for some bizarre reason, but thank you. You raise a good point, certainly about Labour and the Conservatives. Matt in Cheshire, if you're still listening, we didn't hang up on you, mate. We just lost your line, which is why Peter Cardwell is here to save the day. Peter, could you pick up on what Matt was saying, please?
Not really, because I wasn't particularly listening.
Outrageous, you say.
Sorry.
This is what's happening here.
What was he saying? Oh, no, you were talking about Farage and whether Farage could put together
whether they can,
the top team.
I always give this example. When the last election, just before the last election, I had a fella plastering my wall, okay, because there was a leaky wall, and he was plastering the wall. I was chatting away to him, and he said, "Oh, he said, I don't just do this. He said, I'm also the Reform candidate for barking."
Okay.
And I went, "That's brilliant." I don't know why he was plastering my wall. We were 2 weeks away from an election. I said, "Shouldn't you be in the high street right now with a leaflet?" He goes, "No, I go up there at the weekends and do it." But the point is, Clive, his name was, and he was a really top bloke, and he actually came second. It's Margaret Hodges' seat, isn't it?
Barking?
That's right.
Barking and Dagenham?
Yeah. But the point is, Clive, my plasterer, could be the Home Secretary, couldn't he? Well, the next day, but that's what Reform are going to face.
But we, unlike every member of the cabinet, Clive knows what it's like to run a business.
That's very true.
And knows what it's like to pay national insurance contributions and
plaster a wall.
And plaster a wall. I mean, when was the last time Ed Miliband? I wouldn't trust Ed Miliband to plaster a wall. I wouldn't trust Ed Miliband to change a plug. So there's practical people with practical ideas who may well be in the cabinet. And is that a bad thing necessarily? We've looked for the last 15 years. We've had a load of lawyers. We've had a load of people who've had professional careers, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe a few tradesmen and women might be the way forward.
Yeah, true. I guess when you like the Tories and Labour, when they come to the next election, they've got a stock of names.
Yep.
Probably most of them hopeless, but they've got a stock of names there who stood before.
Yep.
They've been local councillors. There's all of that going on. So they would argue that we've got a better choice.